Welcome to Dracula Harry. Today's adventure. What if Blade found Harry in Knockturn Alley and trained him as the Daywalker Wizard of Britain? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, Nocturne Cargo. The Northern Line ran black at this hour, the second-to-last train rocking through the cut between Camden Town and Tottenham Court Road with its windows fogged from rain off the gutters above. Eric stood at the rear of the last car with one shoulder braced against the pole and the other against the rolled-up sleeve of a coat that hid the leather harness underneath. He watched the reflection of his own face in the dark glass and did not blink. The eyes that looked back at him were the wrong color for a man, but they had been the wrong color for so long now that he had stopped noticing. 3 rows ahead, a woman in a wet Macintosh slept with her chin on her chest. Across the aisle, a boy in a band t-shirt nodded along to something piped into his ears from a Walkman. A drunk near the doors muttered to a paper cup. None of them were what he was hunting. He could tell because he could smell them, the warm copper undertone of human iron through skin, and beneath that the ordinary catalog of beer and tobacco and a perfume gone sour by the end of a long shift. None of it caught in his throat the way the other thing did, the dead flower sweetness of a feeder who had crossed this carriage within the hour and stepped off again before the train had even rolled. He waited. He let the train carry him past 4 stops before he stood. At Charing Cross, he stepped out into the tile and yellow lamplight and walked up the long stairs without looking back. Whistler had the Bronco parked under a railway bridge 2 blocks east, lights off, motor running low. The old man cracked the passenger window when Eric came up alongside. "Tell me you got something," Whistler said. He came through here, walked off the Camden Town platform at 12 past, off this one at 12:38, sweet no rot, recent feed. Then he was carrying. Whistler reached across and pushed the door open. Eric got in and closed it without making a sound. The cab smelled of cordite and oil and the inside of an old man's coat. A folded Ordnance Survey map lay across the dashboard with red ink scribbled over the strand and a pencil mark hovering over a side road that the printed sheet did not show. Whistler tapped that mark. Source called it Knockturn Alley, off Charing Cross Road just past a pub called the Leaky Cauldron. He says you don't see the entrance unless you already know to look. What kind of source? The kind who used to be Met Special Branch before something ate 2 of his blokes in a basement off the Mile End Road, and he started keeping a notebook he didn't show his sergeant. Says there's a wholesale trade running out of this alley. Says they don't sell trinkets to the punters. Says they sell people by the leader. Eric ran one gloved hand over the harness across his chest and felt the silver of the sword's pommel cold beneath the leather. Blood bank. Industrial, bagged, refrigerated, shipped. Some bastards still need a wake-up call. Clients, locals topside, and my friend says a wealthier set that move through this same alley, robes, wands, calls themselves wizards. The blood bank caters to a market on either side of the door. Eric let the word sit. He had heard mages mentioned twice before, once in Morocco by a smuggler with the truth being beaten out of him, and once in a New Orleans den that had not survived the next sunset. He had never bothered to ask. The trade had never crossed his trail with enough weight to matter. Tonight it did. "Then we go in," he said. "Then we go in, but quiet, we don't know who's watching for what." Whistler turned the key off, slid out of the cab, and went around to the back. He unlocked the rear panel and ran his hand over the rack inside. A short auto shotgun loaded with Hawthorne slugs, 2 of the silver cord stakes he had been finishing in his workshop the previous week, a vial of EDTA, a slim leather case that held the penlight, and the glaive across the top, oiled and folded. He did not take the glaive. He took the shotgun and a snub-nosed revolver and the penlight and a leather pouch of garlic essence beads with the elastic seal he had stitched on himself. "I take point," Eric said. "You always take point. Stay 6 steps behind me. If it goes loud, I want you angled at the door." "Always do." They walked. The Strand at midnight was a corridor of cab lights and shuttered shops and one drunk sitting against the wall of the Coutts building with his trousers wet to the knees. They turned up Charing Cross Road and walked north under the boarded-up windows of a closed cinema. Eric let his sense of smell do the work. Twice he turned his head a fraction, and the other side of the street smelled like wet pavement and frying oil and the small dirty pulse of a fox in a bin. Once he turned his head and the air went sweet for a half a step, then gone. He stopped outside a pub with a black-painted door and a sign that read the Leaky Cauldron in white serif letters lit from beneath by a coach lamp. The pub did not look closed. The pub looked, in fact, as though it had been here at this hour for 1,000 years. With no patrons inside and no light through the windows, and yet that small steady undertone of a kitchen fire still working somewhere. Beside the pub stood a brick wall that ought to have been the side of a music shop. Across that wall ran a thin diagonal seam in the masonry, almost invisible, the kind of join an honest mason would never have left. Eric pressed his gloved palm against the bricks and pushed. The wall folded. It did not creak. It rearranged itself the way a deck of cards rearranged itself in a sharp's hand, the bricks rotating around an axis that was not there, and where the wall had been there was now an alleyway. The alley did not run straight. It bent left after 20 feet and then right after another 20, and the lamps along its length were not gas and not electric and burned a slow blue color against soot-black ironwork. Now that's a thing, Whistler said behind him. It's a door. It's a door I have never seen before. I have lived 61 years and I have never seen a door open like that. Then welcome to the trade. They walked in. The air past the wall was warmer than the street and tasted of wood smoke and tallow and something else. A perfume that did not belong in any decade Eric had lived through. The smell of old paper kept too long in a cellar. The shopfronts along the alley sold things he did not know how to name. A black cabinet behind one window held a row of glass jars in which thin pink shapes drifted and unfurled. A second window held a single chair upholstered in something that might have been velvet and might have been hide and was the wrong color either way. A third window held nothing but a brass scale with one brass weight on it, and the weight was rocking slowly back and forth though there was no draft. A man in a tall hat passed them on the left and did not look up. A woman in a velvet cloak passed them on the right with a small carrying case in her hand, and the case smelled wrong. Eric watched her shoulders until she rounded the second bend. "Shipment," he said. "Hot or cold?" "Cold, bagged, recent draw." "Then we are in the right alley." They followed her. She turned right at the second bend and went down 3 steps into a doorway lit from above by a hanging lantern with a flame that did not flicker. The lantern's flame was blue. Above the door a sign hung from a chain. The sign read in flaking gilt, BORGIN and BURKES. Whistler hung back. Eric stood across the alley in a doorway of his own and watched. The cloak woman went in. Through the leaded window he could see the back of her shoulders and another shape rising to meet her from behind a counter, an older man with gray hair clubbed at the nape. They spoke. The carrying case crossed the counter. The older man waited on a brass scale identical to the one Eric had seen 2 doors down, and he wrote something in a ledger and he handed across a packet of folded notes. "They're paying her in pounds sterling," Whistler murmured at his ear. "So at least one of these alleys still uses Her Majesty's money. Good, that means they think like criminals on the other side of the door too." The woman left. She passed Eric without seeing him. He let her go. Whistler eyed him. Not her, not her. Then what? The man inside has just bought blood and paid for it like a fishmonger. There will be more sellers tonight, we watch. They watched for the better part of an hour. In that hour 3 more carriers came down the steps and went into Borgin and Burke's. 2 carried small cases. The third carried a covered basket from which a thin film of cold breathed when it crossed the lantern light. They came out without their burdens, with packets of notes, and they walked away in 3 different directions without speaking to one another. The fourth visitor was not a carrier. The fourth visitor was a fat man, red of face, wearing a brown overcoat too thin for the weather. He came down the alley from the way Eric and Whistler had come, the wall direction, walking with the careful and resentful step of a man not at home in any place. He held a small boy by the wrist. The boy walked behind him. Eric saw the boy and did not move for the length of a breath. Then he moved his gaze to Whistler and did not need to speak. Whistler had seen. The boy was thin in the way that comes from a long pattern of meals not eaten. He wore a jumper too large for him with a stain on the shoulder. His hair was black and standing in every direction at once. His glasses were taped at the bridge. On his forehead, half hidden under the hair, was a scar. The scar was thin and clean and exactly the shape of a lightning bolt. The man knocked on the door opened. The gray-haired man at the counter looked past the fat man at the boy and did not smile. The fat man said something Eric could not hear and the gray-haired man stepped back to let them in. Eric crossed the alley. He did not run. He moved at the steady pace of a man who has decided how the next minute will go and is no longer interested in being talked out of it. Whistler fell in behind him at the agreed 6 paces. Eric took the steps in too. He did not push the door. He took the latch in his gloved hand and held it. He listened. Through the door he heard a man's voice he did not know. Oily, careful. "Mr. Dursley, you have a particular reputation in our circles for being a man of his word. Show me." The fat man breathing hard. 3 weeks of feeding him. 3 weeks I haven't had a wink, what with the cupboard rattling and the dreams. I want shot of him and I want fair price for him. You said 100. For a healthy specimen. He's healthy. Skinny but healthy. The boy's a potter. A pause. Then he is more than healthy, Mr. Dursley. He is interesting. Stand him under the light. A scrape of a stool. A grunt from the fat man. Then in a small voice that had clearly been told not to speak. "Sir, please, I haven't." "Be quiet, boy." "Sir." A slap, soft, practiced. The kind of slap that has been delivered before in a kitchen by a hand that owns its delivery. Eric pushed the door. The bell over the door did not have time to make a full sound. He took it off its bracket on the way through with one motion of the left hand and let the silver tongue of it fall onto the doormat without ringing. The man behind the counter, gray-haired, oil-eyed, had been bending forward to peer at the boy under the blue light. He came up and his teeth came down with him. His teeth had been hidden by the way he had been speaking. Now they were not hidden. The fat man Dursley made the sound a heavy man makes when he has been turned at the shoulder by someone much faster. He was a step from the counter and Eric was already past him. He had not noticed Eric come in. He noticed Whistler in the doorway with the shotgun lifted at his hip and the muzzle covering the corner where the back room began, and he made a noise that was either a question or a protest. He never finished it. The gray-haired man came over the counter. His mouth had opened to the bone, the way the faces of his kind opened when there was no further reason to pretend, and his hands had hooked at the joints with that other angle of bend. He came fast. Eric was faster. The sword left its sheath on the diagonal. He had drawn it 1,000 times. He drew it this time exactly as he had drawn it the other times, the way a clockmaker tightens a screw, without flourish, without speed measurable to the eye, only the conclusion of the motion. The blade caught the gray-haired man across the throat in the space between the rising and the falling of his weight, and the rest of the work belonged to the next half-second. There was an instant of resistance against the silver edge of the blade, and then no resistance. The gray-haired man landed in 2 pieces on the floor of his own shop. The pieces hissed and began to come undone the way snow comes undone in a chimney. Whistler did not lower the shotgun. The back room had a curtain. The curtain had not moved. "Clear it," Eric said. Whistler stepped past him and ripped the curtain aside. The back room held a cot, a cabinet with 3 glass doors, and an industrial freezer with the lid up. The freezer was stacked with bagged blood in neat rows of 2 pints each. The bags were tagged in a copperplate hand. Whistler whistled once and low and let the curtain fall back. The fat man Dursley had pressed himself against a glass case full of small bone-colored objects and was staring at the place where the gray-haired man had been a second ago. His mouth was open. His eyes were on the heap of ash that had been ahead. The boy stood under the blue light. He had not moved. The slap mark on his cheek was already going up to the second color. Eric stepped toward Dursley. He did not raise the sword. He let it hang. "You are Mr. Dursley," he said. His voice did not raise. It was the voice he used when he wanted to be heard exactly. "You brought this child here to sell him for 100 pounds. I don't. What was that thing? What?" "That thing was the buyer. The buyer is dead. Who is the boy to you?" My nephew. He's my nephew. Vernon's son. Vernon's brother's boy. That is, I mean my brother Vernon. Where are his parents?" Dead for years. Car crash. The family says it was a car crash. It wasn't a car crash." Dursley swallowed and tried his face on Eric, and his face had nothing to offer that worked. He was a man whose lies had functioned for 40 years on the assumption that no one in the room would ever push back. Eric was not in the habit of arranging his face to make liars comfortable. "How long have you had him?" A month. Vernon couldn't, Petunia couldn't stand him. He was odd, the things he made happen by accident, the windows and the— "How much did Vernon pay you to take him?" Dursley was silent. "How much?" 200 to keep him for a while. I was going to take it down to 100 profit if you bastards just paid me on time." The boy under the blue light had not made a sound. He was watching Eric the way an animal watches a larger animal, not pleading, only measuring. Eric turned his head a fraction toward Whistler. "Take the boy out. He doesn't need to see this." Whistler set the shotgun across his elbow and walked past the boy with a hand that did not touch him but indicated a direction. "Son, come on with me, just a step outside, that's all." The boy looked at Eric. Eric said, "Go with the old man, he won't hurt you." The boy went. When the door closed behind them, Eric let the sword come up. Dursley pressed back harder against the glass case. The case rocked. Eric stopped the case with his free hand without looking at it. "Marcus Dursley," he said. The fat man flinched at the use of his name. "I want you to understand a thing. The shop you walked into tonight has been pulling about 30 pints of human blood a week out of London, packing it, and selling it to men who eat it. They have done that for years. The reason they have done it for years is because the people they take from look like that boy, skinny, sold to them by their own kin for the price of a few weeks of groceries. You are the supply line, you and the men like you. You are the reason this trade exists at all." Dursley made a small noise. "I am not interested in arguing with you," Eric said. "I am interested in stopping the supply line, so." He killed Marcus Dursley quickly. He did it because he had decided to do it before he had crossed the threshold, and he did it without anger because anger would have made the killing less clean, and clean killing was the only kind he respected. He stepped back from the body and wiped the silver edge of the blade on the dead man's overcoat and sheathed it. He did not look at the heap of ash on the floor. He went out into the alley. Whistler had the boy 2 doors up under one of the blue lanterns. The boy was sitting on the stone step of a darkened shopfront with his thin legs crossed at the ankles. Whistler was crouched in front of him with the penlight out and the cap unscrewed. The penlight's beam was a thin line of white the color of December noon. Whistler was running the beam slowly along the inside of the boy's wrist, watching where it caught the veins under the skin. He looked up when Eric came out. "Eric, what? Come look at this." Eric crouched beside him. The boy did not flinch from his closeness. The boy had not flinched, in fact, from anything since the moment of the slap. He was watching them both with the same measuring quietness he had used in the shop. His glasses had been crooked on the bridge before. They were straighter now, as though someone had nudged them while he wasn't paying attention. Whistler ran the penlight beam along the wrist again. Where the beam crossed the vein darkened from the ordinary blue of human Venus returned to a thin shimmer that was almost no color at all. Whistler moved the beam to the other wrist. The same thing. He moved it to the inside of the elbow. The vein there darkened, and at the darkening a thin pink line came up under the skin and ran an inch and then faded. "He's got it," Whistler said quietly. "Got what?" "What you got, plus what they got. He's got both." "He's 8. He's 8 and he's halfway through a conversion he started when he was 1. That scar on his forehead, that's not just a scar, that's the entry. Something bit him the night his parents died, Eric. Something with a mouth small enough to leave a mark that thin. And whatever bit him put venom in, and his body did the same thing yours did. It took the venom and it argued with it, and it kept the day part and lost the night part. He's a daywalker, Eric. He's 8 years old and he doesn't know what he is." The boy was watching them. "Sir," he said soft. "Are you talking about me?" Eric looked at him. The boy was looking back at him through the taped glasses with eyes that did not match the rest of the face. The rest of the face was hollow. The eyes were not hollow. The eyes were green and they were old. "Yeah," Eric said. "We're talking about you. What's your name?" "Harry." "Harry what?" "Harry Potter, sir. And the man you came in with." "My Uncle Marcus, sir. Uncle Vernon's brother. They sent me to him when Aunt Petunia couldn't. She said I made the milk go wrong. I didn't mean to." "You didn't make the milk go wrong. Where did your parents die?" They say a car crash." "It wasn't a car crash." "No, sir. You know that." "I have the dream, sir. The green light, the woman, the voice." "Yeah," Eric said again, soft. "Some bastards still need a wake-up call." The boy did not understand that line. The boy was 8, but the boy did not need to understand it. He nodded once at the part he had recognized, which was the tone, and he kept his eyes on Eric's face. Whistler clicked off the penlight and put it back in his coat. "Eric." "Yes. This is not a thing we can hand to the city authorities and walk away from. This is not a thing we can hand to anyone. The shop is going to be missed in 24 hours. The supply chain is going to look for its source, and when they look they are going to find Marcus Dursley dead in there, and when they trace Marcus Dursley they are going to trace him back to the house in Little Winging where his brother lives. The whole family will be questioned. The boy will be questioned. Someone will see what we just saw under the penlight and they will know what we know and they will take him. I know, so we cannot leave him. I know, so you are going to do a thing you have not done before, my friend." "Yes." Eric looked at the boy a long moment. The boy looked back. The boy did not yet know that he had just stopped being the property of one family and become the responsibility of another, and even if he had known, he would not have been able to do anything about it. But he did know, in the way that children sometimes know more than they have words for, that the 2 men in front of him on this strange alley with its blue lanterns and its smell of old paper were the first 2 adults he had met in his short life who had looked at him and seen him and not been disappointed. "Harry," Eric said, "Sir, you're going to come with us." The boy considered it. He considered it with the same careful, measuring quietness. Then he nodded. "Yes, sir," he said. Eric stood. Whistler stood. The lantern over Borgin and Burke's had begun to gutter and dim, because there was no one inside the shop any longer to keep it lit. Down the alley a bell rang twice and a voice somewhere called out a name that was not theirs. Up at the wall, a faint scuffle suggested another carrier was on the way and would arrive in a minute to find his customer gone to ash and his contact dead in the doorway. "We need to be gone," Whistler said. "We need to be gone." Eric reached down and took the boy's hand. The boy's hand fit inside his glove without filling it. The hand was cold. The hand was bird bone thin. The pulse at the wrist when Eric closed his fingers and felt for it was a slow, steady thump that did not stutter at his touch. "Come on, son," he said. They walked back the way they had come. The boy walked between them. The wall at the end of the alley folded back open for them without any of them touching it. The Strand on the other side smelled of rain and London and ordinary mortal lives, and the Bronco was where Whistler had left it under the bridge, and they got in and they drove. They drove east first, then north, then south again to break any tail, and the boy sat between them on the bench seat and did not ask a single question for 19 miles. At mile 20 he asked, "Soft, sir, where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Eric said. "I have never been somewhere safe, sir." "No," Eric said. "I know." He did not say anything else for a while. The boy leaned eventually against Eric's coat because the coat was the closer of the two, and the boy fell asleep there, and the boy slept the way children sleep when they have not slept properly in a long time, with both hands curled under his chin and his mouth slightly open and his thin chest moving up and down faster than it should have. Whistler glanced sideways once at the boy and then at Eric. "You are going to be a father, my friend," Whistler said. "Shut up and drive." "I am driving." "Drive harder." Whistler did not say anything else. He smiled, though, in the small grim way he had of smiling, and he drove. The Bronco took the corner onto the A2 and the lights of the city dropped away behind them, and ahead the long road went on through the dark. They went to ground in a service flat above a tire garage in Dartford that Whistler had paid for in cash 3 years before and had used twice. The garage below was shuttered. The stairs up the back were iron and unlit. Whistler carried the boy up the stairs with the boy still asleep against his shoulder, and Eric came up behind with the kit, and they shut the door at the top and threw the bolt and the chain. The flat was 2 rooms and a kitchen. The windows had been replaced with reinforced glass and the curtains were the heavy kind. There was a single bed in the back room with a blanket folded at its foot. Whistler laid the boy down on the blanket because the boy was filthy and the blanket would wash, and the boy did not wake. Whistler took off the broken glasses and folded them and set them on the night table. He stood looking at the boy a moment with an old man's face that did not give much away. In the front room, Eric was already at the kitchen table with the kit open. He had the EDTA vial out and the syringe and the small steel basin. He had wiped down the table with alcohol from the press under the sink. He looked up when Whistler came back in. "How is he?" "Out cold. He'll be out for hours." The body finally got permission to stop. "Draw." Whistler nodded and took the syringe and went back into the bedroom. He came out with a half milliliter of the boy's blood in the barrel and set it on the table between them. They looked at it together. The blood was the right color, the dark red of healthy human venous draw. Then Whistler unfolded the penlight again and shone the beam across the barrel of the syringe, and where the beam crossed the blood went a color neither of them had a name for, a sheen like oil on water that came up and went down again as the beam moved. "There it is," Whistler said. "How far along?" 6-7%. He's metabolizing it. The conversion's stable. He has been carrying it since whatever happened the night his parents went, and his body has been working through it for 7 years, and it has not killed him and it has not turned him. He is what you are, Eric, a little earlier in the process, with a great deal more time to grow into it. Eric did not say anything for a while. He sat with his hands on the edge of the table and he looked at the dark in the corner of the room. Whistler put the syringe down and sat across from him. "You knew there were others," Whistler said. "I knew the math said there had to be. I had not met one. Now you have. Now I have." And Eric looked at him. "And he is 8 years old and his own family sold him for £100, and I am not handing him back to a system that lost him in the first place, so we keep him. We keep him and we teach him what he is before someone else teaches him what he isn't, and we make him good enough that whatever comes for him next does not put him in a freezer." Whistler nodded once. "All right," he said. "All right, then we have work." Eric stood and walked to the bedroom door and looked in at the boy sleeping on the blanket. The boy had turned in his sleep so that his face was toward the doorway, and his mouth was open and his breathing was steady. The lightning scar on his forehead caught the light from the lamp behind Eric. The scar was the color of a healed burn, but it had its own faint movement under the skin, a slow rhythmic pulse like the heart of a very small thing. "Sleep, son," Eric said soft to no one who could hear him. "We'll start tomorrow." He shut the door and turned out the lamp in the front room and sat in the dark of the kitchen with the silver sword across his knees. And he did not sleep that night, and he watched the door. And when the first gray came over the rooftops of Dartford, he was still watching it. The boy woke at 10 in the morning with the sun coming through the heavy curtains in a thin line across the foot of the bed. He woke the way he had been trained by 7 years in a cupboard to wake, which was with the eye open and the body still and the breathing not yet committed to being heard. He held the not being heard for the count of 5. He listened. He heard from the front of the flat a kettle. He heard, against the kettle, the low voice of the old man with the shotgun talking to somebody who was answering in a voice he had not yet heard. He sat up. His glasses were folded on the night table. Someone had taped the broken bridge while he had slept. The tape was the proper white tape, the kind a doctor used, and the bridge of the glasses was now stronger than it had been the day before. He put the glasses on. He swung his thin legs over the edge of the bed. His feet touched the bare floor. The floor was warmer than any floor he could remember. The bedroom door was not locked. He went to the door and listened. The voice that was answering Whistler was a woman's. She was not loud. She was telling Whistler something about a chemistry test, and Whistler was nodding, which Harry could not see but could hear from the way the voice stopped and started. And then the woman said in a clearer voice, Has he had a meal in the last 3 days? I need to know if I'm setting the dose against an empty body or a fed one. Harry opened the door. The woman in the kitchen was Quirrell. She had not got the name yet in the boy's mind, but she had the face. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder open and a small black case at her elbow. Whistler was at the stove. The kettle was hissing. Eric was not in the kitchen. Good morning, Quirrell said. Good morning, ma'am. Come and sit. Are you hungry? Yes, ma'am. Then we will fix that. Sit. My name is Quirrell. He sat. He sat with his hands in his lap because he had been told for 7 years not to put his hands on the table in someone else's kitchen until he had been told he might. Quirrell looked at the hands. She did not say anything about them. She got up from the table. She got down a bowl from the cupboard. She poured into the bowl from a pan on the stove a serving of porridge with a small pat of butter, and she set the bowl in front of him with a spoon. Eat, we will talk while you eat. He ate. The porridge was the first hot food he had been given in 3 weeks. He ate it slowly. He did not look up. Quirrell sat back down across the table and opened the small black case. She took out a folded paper. She set the paper on the table beside her own coffee. Harry, yes, ma'am. Quirrell, yes, Quirrell. Last night the 2 men who brought you here looked at your blood under a special light. Did Mr. Brooks tell you that this morning? I haven't seen Mr. Brooks this morning, ma'am. Quirrell. Then I am going to tell you, the blood inside you is not exactly the kind of blood that goes inside most boys. It is mostly the same, about 93% the same. The other 7% is a thing that you have been carrying since you were very small, and it is the reason a number of things have happened to you in your short life that you have not been able to explain. Are you with me? Yes. The 7% is the reason that, for instance, the milk goes wrong when your Aunt Petunia is in a temper with you. Yes. The 7% is also the reason a very bad man tried to buy you last night and was not buying you to be his nephew. He was buying you to drink. Are you with me? Yes. Mr. Brooks has the same 7%. He has had it longer than you have because he was born with it and you were given it, and there is a difference. But you and he have the same kind of thing in you. He is a man who has spent a great deal of his adult life learning to live with the thing in a way that does not hurt anybody who does not deserve to be hurt. He is willing to teach you to do the same. She had spoken very evenly. She had not used any of the words that would have made a child afraid. She had used a number of the words that explained. Harry chewed the porridge. He swallowed. He set the spoon in the bowl. Quirrell, yes. If I go with him, will I have to drink anybody? Number, I am here to make sure of that. I am a chemist. I have a serum that you will take twice a day, and the serum stops the part of the 7% that would make you want to drink anybody. You will not be hungry that way. The serum tastes a little bit of iron filings. It is not pleasant. It is not bad. Yes. Yes. All right then. She closed the folder. Whistler at the stove set down the kettle and turned around. He was holding 2 mugs of tea. He set one in front of Quirrell and one in front of his own chair, and then he sat down at the third side of the table. Son, Whistler said, sir, do you want to come with us? Yes, sir. Do you want it because you don't have anywhere else to go, or do you want it because you want it? Sir, I don't know the difference yet, sir. Whistler nodded slowly. Fair, he said, fair. You'll know the difference by Christmas. If you don't, you can leave at Christmas. You hear me? Christmas is the deadline. Until then, we are your people. After then, if you want, we still are. If you don't, we put you somewhere safer than where you were and we walk away. Yes. Yes, sir. All right, finish the porridge. He finished the porridge. Eric came into the kitchen from the front room while he was finishing. Eric had a thin sheen of damp on his shoulders from having been on the iron stairs in the rain. He had a paper bag in his hand. He set the paper bag on the table. Inside the paper bag were a new pair of children's trousers, a new jumper, and a pair of socks, all in the boy's size. Eric had bought them at a shop on the high street that morning at first opening. Eric had bought them with cash he had withdrawn at 6 from a service station bank that did not run cameras. Put these on after, Eric said, then we drive. Yes, sir, you don't have to call me sir. Yes, Eric let it pass. The boy would work out in time what to call him. The boy had eaten porridge in a warm kitchen with 3 adults at the table who were not, between them, planning to sell him for any price at all. The boy, for now, was as fed as he had been at any moment in his short life, and that was where Eric intended for him to stay. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Sun Drills. By the autumn after Dartford, they were in Detroit. The safe house was a 4-story machine shop on the riverside of the city that had been a foundry once and a parts warehouse after that, and was now nothing on paper at all. The ground floor was kept dirty on purpose so any passing eye would write it off. The second floor was workshop. The third floor was training. The fourth floor was where they slept and where they cooked, and where, in the south-facing corner, they had set up a room for the boy with a real bed and a desk under the window, and a lamp that was the warm yellow color Quirrell had chosen, because she said cold light was the worst thing you could give a child to fall asleep under. Quirrell had come into the project that first November. Whistler had reached out to a woman he had known briefly in a former life, a hematologist who had been pushed out of a research post at Wayne State for asking questions about a serum patent that did not behave the way the patent said it behaved. She had not asked many questions when Whistler called. She had asked one, "Is the boy alive?" Whistler had said yes. Quirrell had said all right then, and she had driven north through Indiana and Michigan in a Volvo full of laboratory glass. And she had moved into the second-floor workshop with the calm efficiency of a woman who has been waiting her whole adult life to do work that mattered. She was 32 then. She had hair the color of a wet penny and a face that smiled more than it had reason to. She wore a white coat over jeans and she swore in 3 languages when her centrifuges misbehaved, and she taught Harry in those first weeks that an adult could be afraid of a thing and still walk toward it. The first time she drew his blood, she narrated every step. "Tourniquet here, not tight, I'll tap the vein, see this one, tell me if it pinches, needle in, done, that wasn't bad, was it?" "No, ma'am, Quirrell." "A Quirrell's good. Now we look at it under a light and I tell you what your body is doing and you tell me when you don't understand a word and I will explain the word and we will be honest with each other forever. Deal. Deal." She had explained the hunger to him before the hunger had a chance to explain itself. She had said, "There is a chemical in you and it is going to make you want a thing you must not have, and the want will be very loud and the want will lie to you about being need. The serum I am going to give you blocks the want. You take it once in the morning and once at night. If you skip a dose, the want will start to come back and it will start to whisper. If you skip 2 doses, it will shout. You will not skip doses." Yes, he did not skip doses. He took the EDTA the way other children took multivitamins, sat on the kitchen counter while she counted out the milliliters into the cup, and he never once complained that it tasted like iron filings rinsed in salt water, because nobody who has lived in a cupboard under a staircase for 7 years complains about a taste at the breakfast table. Eric did the body work. The first month he had Harry do nothing but stand. Bare feet on a tatami mat in the 3rd-floor gym, knees soft, weight even on the balls and heels. He had Harry stand that way for 30 minutes and then for an hour and then for 2 hours. He did not let the boy speak during the standing. He had him watch the way his own breath moved through his chest and the way his weight settled and lifted with each breath. He told him that everything that came after, every blade, every shot, every step would be built on the way he stood, and a man who could not stand could not fight. The second month was footwork. Step, pivot step, cross step, reverse cross step, carry your center under your spine, do not lean, do not rise. Move the way water moves. The 3rd month was hands. By the start of his 9th year, the boy could pivot on a 6-pence. By the middle of his 9th year, he could carry a wooden waster sword through a 14-cut form without the tip wavering. By the end of his 9th year, he had a real blade, a silver-cord short sword that Whistler had ground down from a longer piece, with a hilt wrapped in black cord and a pommel weighted to balance an inch above the guard. The blade was the length of his forearm and would grow with him. Whistler had built into the tang a fitting that would take a longer blade when Harry's reach allowed for one. Eric drilled him with that sword at dawn and at dusk. He drilled him with the wand hand and the sword hand separately and then together. He drilled him with the lights out. He drilled him with the lights so bright the boy's pupils ached. He drilled him with one of them blindfolded and the other narrating cuts. He drilled him until the cuts were as ordinary as breathing. Sometimes after, the boy would sit on the edge of the mat with a towel around his shoulders, and Eric would crouch beside him and pour him water from the tin cup and not say much. Other men in other lives might have used the pause for praise. Eric did not praise. He had decided early that the boy would get plenty of praise from the world for things that did not matter, and he was going to be the man who praised him only for things that did. The praise would arrive in time. Would arrive as a head nod no more, and the boy would know what the head nod meant. The head nod arrived the first time at the end of the boy's 10th year after a sparring round in which the boy had crossed Eric's guard at the wrist with a movement Eric had not taught him and could not, looking back at the round in his head, account for. "You made that up," Eric said. "Yes, from where?" "From the way you were standing, sir. You were tired. Your weight was a little forward." Eric had looked at him a long second. Then the nod. The boy had looked at the nod for a long time after Eric had walked out of the gym, the way another child might have looked at a trophy. Whistler took ordnance. Whistler took the boy down to the workshop on the 2nd floor and walked him through the cabinets one drawer at a time. He showed him garlic essence distilled in a glass coil from cloves grown on the roof, the wood-tip stakes, the silver-tip stakes, the hawthorn slugs, the UV charge in its small palladium housing the size of a matchbox, the field charge UV grenade that opened like a flower for the half-second of its discharge. He showed him every piece. He made him take every piece apart and put every piece back together. He had a rule that no weapon would be carried into the field by a person who could not, in the dark, with cold hands, in under a minute, disassemble and reassemble it. Harry's hands were small. Harry got fast. The 3rd year Whistler started letting him design. What would you put on a stake for a feeder you knew was going to be wearing Kevlar? Heavier head, sir, silver alloyed, not coated. Why not coated? Because the Kevlar will scrape the coating and the next strike is dirty. Good. Now what would you put on a stake for a feeder who you knew was going to dodge? Lighter head, sir, speed over mass, and a barbed flange so a glancing hit takes a piece. Where did you get the flange idea? From a fish hook I saw in a tackle catalog, sir. My friend, you make me very tired and very pleased in the same breath. Carry on. Whistler did not praise either, but Whistler talked, and the talk that ran around the workshop on the long Detroit evenings was its own kind of praise. He told the boy stories. He told him about a woman in Bucharest in 1964 who had killed 7 of the elders on her own and lost her left hand in the doing. He told him about a wooden stake that had been carved from a beam of the theater of Pompey and had gone through 9 generations of hunters before being lost in a New York basement in 1979. He told him about Eric. He told him, soft with the boy under his elbow at the workbench late at night, about the woman who had been Eric's mother and the thing that had bit her on the way out of the maternity ward and the way Eric had come into the world already half what he was. He told him so that the boy would understand what he was sitting next to. He told him so that the boy would not be afraid of the man, even on the nights when Eric was hardest to be near. Quirrell ran the rest of the schooling. She had taught secondary school chemistry for a year between her doctorate and her research post, and she had not lost the knack. She made Harry maths and reading and history in 2-hour blocks at the kitchen table after breakfast and before sword drill. She made him write essays. She made him read books. She started him on Dickens because she said Dickens was where you learned what the 19th century had wanted to forget. And she pushed him through Bleak House the year he was 9 the way another mother might have walked a child through swimming lessons. She also taught him to cook. She said you will be in places where the food is wrong and your serum is in your bag and you will need to make yourself something hot. You learn to use a pan. She taught him rice. She taught him eggs. She taught him a chicken and rice dish her grandmother had taught her, an Iranian thing with saffron and dried lime, and the first time Harry made it without supervision, Eric ate 3 bowls and said nothing and Whistler said too much. The first Christmas was the closest he had ever been to one. Quirrell had bought a tree. Whistler had grumbled about the tree, but had nailed a wooden stand for it. Eric had not commented on the tree, but Eric had on Christmas morning presented Harry with a flat package wrapped in brown butcher's paper, and inside the package had been a leather sheath cut to fit the silver short sword exactly and oiled to a deep brown shine. The sheath had been hand-tooled along the seam with a thin pattern of running ivy. The pattern had been Quirrell's idea. Eric had done the tooling himself in the workshop on 3 consecutive nights after Harry had gone to bed. Harry, when he opened it, had not said anything for a long minute. Then he had stood up from the kitchen chair and walked across the kitchen to Eric and put both arms around the man's waist. Eric had not been hugged in many years. He had stood for a moment with his hands in the air, not certain what to do with them, and then he had put one hand on the back of the boy's head and one between the shoulders, and he had closed his eyes for a span of 3 breaths, and that was Christmas. Bellamy came in the second year. He came in because Whistler had said one March evening over the workshop bench that the boy had a part of him they could not touch. He had said, Eric, the boy is doing magic in his sleep. The light bulb in the kitchen has burst 3 times in 2 weeks and there is no fault in the wiring. He sets the cutlery rattling when he dreams. We can teach him to swing a sword and we can keep his hunger down with Quirrell's serum and we can put a UV grenade in his hand and trust him to throw it correctly. But there is a wand-shaped hole in this child, and if we do not fill it, we will be sorry the first time he goes into a room with a man who knows how to use one against him. Eric had said, then we find someone. Whistler had said, I have found someone. Bellamy was an Englishman in his late 60s, who had been a warder for the Department of Mysteries until 1968 and a private tutor since. He lived in a clapboard house in Windsor on the Canadian side of the river, and had answered Whistler's inquiry through a contact 2 layers deep, with the careful interest of a man who did not particularly want to be retired any longer. He crossed the bridge twice a week, Tuesdays and Saturdays, with a battered briefcase and a wand in an interior pocket of his overcoat, and he came up the iron stairs at the back of the foundry and let himself in with the password and the key, and he took the boy into the 3rd-floor library for 2 hours at a time. He did not teach in any standard curriculum. He said the standard curriculum was a list of pranks dressed up as a course, and he was not interested in turning the child into a clerk. He taught Harry first the shield charm, he taught him the disarming charm, he taught him the banishing and the summoning. He taught him the ridiculous the 2nd year because he said the ridiculous was the only spell in the textbook that was a philosophy first and a spell second. He spent 3 weeks on that one alone, until Harry could hold the wand and laugh at the same time, on demand, with conviction. He taught him to feel a magical field as a presence in the room. He blindfolded him and made him stand in the center of the third-floor library while Bellamy cast quiet, ordinary spells from various points and Harry pointed at the source. By the end of the second year, Harry could point correctly 9 times in 10 and was wrong only when the spell was very small and against a curtain. Bellamy did not teach him offensive curses. He said he did not believe in teaching offensive curses to a child whose other tutors had already given him a sword. He said the sword was an honest weapon and a curse was a cheat and a child should learn the honest weapon first. He did, however, teach him the Patronus. He started him on it the second winter and he did not press it. He said the Patronus was a difficult spell and was difficult on purpose, and Harry would get it when he got it. Harry got it the night of his 11th birthday. The Patronus when it came was a stag, large, antlered, white as a chalk drawing on dark paper, and it stood in the center of the third-floor library with its head down for a long moment and then stepped. And it stepped through the wall of the library as though the wall were not there. And Bellamy sat in his chair and dabbed at his glasses with his pocket handkerchief and said very softly that the stag was the animagus form Harry's father had had, and that the boy had not been told that. And that the spell had told the boy on its own. Harry sat on the floor of the library for a while after the stag had gone. He did not cry. He had not cried in front of any of them, not once in 3 years, and he did not cry now. But he sat for a long time and Bellamy did not move from the chair, and when Harry was ready to stand he stood, and they did not speak about the stag again for a long time, but Harry slept that night with the wand under the pillow and he slept well. The letter came the next morning. It came by owl. The owl arrived at the kitchen window at 7 o'clock with the wind off the river, and tapped the glass with its beak until Quirrell, half-dressed in her dressing gown, slid the window up. The owl walked across the sill and dropped the letter on the kitchen table and walked back to the window and sat on the sill expecting payment. Quirrell, after a second, fed it half a strip of bacon. The owl seemed pleased. It took the bacon and flew. The letter was thick and heavy and addressed in green ink to Mr. H. Potter, the South Bedroom, 4th floor, Drury & Sons Building, River Road, Detroit, Michigan. Well, Quirrell said, they've found him. Eric came in from the 3rd floor with the towel still over his shoulder from the morning work. He read the letter without picking it up off the table. Whistler came in from the stairwell with a coffee mug and read it over Eric's shoulder. The 3 of them stood at the kitchen table for half a minute without speaking, and then Quirrell said, we knew this was coming. We knew. You don't want to send him. I don't want to send him. He has to go, Whistler said. He doesn't have to do anything. Eric, he has to go. Eric did not say anything for a while. He picked up the second sheet of the letter, the supply list, and he ran his eye down it and he ran his eye back up. Whistler said, listen to me, son. We have 3 years of work in him. He can move. He can shoot. He can take a knife apart and put it back together in the dark. He can hold a shield charm for 2 minutes against my full pressure on the wand. He has a Patronus. He is, for an 11-year-old, formidable, but what he does not have and what we cannot give him in this kitchen is a network. He goes to Hogwarts, he meets his generation. He learns the wand work he has not yet learned, and he learns it from people who do nothing else. He builds the relationships that will save his life when he is 25. He goes. He goes armed, Eric said. He goes armed. He goes with the sword. He goes with the sword. We get a tailor to cut robes that hide it. We give him the wand and the sword and the EDTA, and he keeps to his schedule, and Bellamy maintains the off-hours tutoring on holidays. He goes. And the headmaster. The headmaster, Whistler said carefully, is a man named Albus Dumbledore. I have been reading on him for 2 years. He is not our enemy. He may be inconvenient. He may have opinions about how a child should be raised. But he is not our enemy, and he will not, once we have made plain that we mean the boy no harm, try to take him from us. Probably. Probably, Eric said, probably. Eric was quiet a long second. Where is the boy? Asleep. He had a hell of a night. Eric folded the letter and the supply list together and slid them into the inside pocket of his coat. We tell him over breakfast. Harry, over breakfast, did not say anything at first. He read the letter twice. He read the supply list once. He looked up at the 3 of them around the kitchen table. Are you coming? He said. To the school? Eric said. To the school. Number we can't. The school doesn't let our kind of people in. Then I won't go. Yes, you will. Eric, yes, you will. Listen, the school is in Scotland. The school is run by people who have been teaching wand work to children for 900 years. They have a syllabus and a kitchen and a library that has things in it Bellamy says he himself was not allowed to read. You go and you learn what we cannot teach you. You take the sword, you take the wand, you take the serum, you write to us once a week, we come if you call. You are not being put out, son, you are being put forward. Harry looked at him for a long while. Harry at 11 had Eric's stillness. He had Quirrell's small, sad smile. He had Whistler's habit of biting the inside of his lower lip when he was thinking. He had on his forehead under the dark hair the lightning scar that had brought them all into the same room in the first place. All right, he said, all right. When do we go for the supplies? Saturday. All right. Diagon Alley on a Saturday morning in late August was a river of robes and owls and small explosions of laughter from the doors of the Quidditch shop. They came through the leaky cauldron the way Bellamy had told them, the backyard wall and the third brick from the dustbin, and they did not look out of place because Quirrell had bought all 4 of them ordinary cloaks at a charity shop in Camden the night before. Whistler had complained about the cloak. Eric had not complained. Eric had bought a pair of dark glasses at a chemist's on the way in and had worn them under the hood of his cloak, and he looked, in the wizarding crowd, like a man who had stepped out of a very interesting funeral. They got the robes first because the tailor's appointment was at 10. Madame Malkin sized Harry quickly and clucked when she measured under his arm and felt the leather harness through the cloth. But she did not say anything. She had been a tailor in this alley for 41 years and she had measured under stranger garments than that. She cut him 3 sets, lined to accommodate the harness with an inside pocket sewn into the right side panel for the wand. She did the work in 2 hours. They paid in galleons converted at Gringotts that morning. They walked out. They got the cauldron, the scales, the books, the parchment, the quills. Quirrell in the bookshop picked up 6 additional titles that were not on the supply list and put them in the basket and looked at Eric and dared him to put them back. Eric did not put them back. Whistler in the apothecaries spent 20 minutes interrogating the proprietor about silver-grade alloys and came away with a small linen sack of powdered silver of a refinement he muttered about appreciatively for the next half hour. Harry did not say much. Harry was looking at everything. The wand they got at Ollivander's. Ollivander did not, perhaps, look at them with as much surprise as he might have looked at another customer, because Bellamy had sent a letter ahead, but he looked at Eric with an attention that did not seem entirely about politeness. He sized Harry. He went into the back. He came out with 7 boxes. The first 6 did nothing. The 7th did. The wand was holly and phoenix feather and 11 inches. Ollivander said, holding the box loosely with both hands, that the brother wand of this one had given Harry the scar on his forehead. He said it the way a man might mention that a coat was made of a particular cloth. Eric's hand was on the pommel of the sword under the cloak before Ollivander had finished the sentence. Ollivander watched Eric's hand and smiled a very small smile and said, "No, no, sir, nothing of the sort. He only mentioned it because the wand had not chosen the boy by accident, and the boy ought to know." Harry did know. Harry had been told the night his parents died, and Harry, after a moment, took the wand and put it carefully into the inside pocket Madame Malkin had sewn for it, and Harry said, "Thank you, sir." Outside Ollivander's, they ran into Lucius Malfoy. He was leaving the bookshop with his son. The son was a thin, pale boy of about Harry's age in good clothes, with hair the color of old wax, and he was looking at the shopfronts the way a child looks at a shop he expects to be allowed to buy from. The father behind the son was tall, expensively cloaked, his hand on a black walking stick with a silver head that had a snake on it. The snake's eyes were green stones. Eric saw the snake before he saw the man. The man stopped to let a heavy witch pass with her trolley, and as he did he looked across the alley and saw Harry. He saw Harry first because of the scar, and then he saw the 3 adults Harry was with, and his eyes ran over each of them in turn and settled on Eric, and his eyes lingered there a beat too long because Eric had not bothered to take the dark glasses off. The wax-haired boy at his side noticed the linger and tugged at his father's sleeve. "Father, who, quiet," Lucius walked toward them. The walking stick tapped twice on the cobble. He came up to a polite distance and inclined his head a small degree. "Mr. Potter," he said, "Sir, forgive me, I did not know you were in the country. I'm here for the year, sir, and these would be my family." Lucius's eyes moved over them again. He smiled. The smile was the smile of a man who has spent a great deal of money on his teeth and is happy for them to be observed. "How charming," he said. Eric stepped forward. He did not take the dark glasses off and he did not raise his voice. He set one gloved hand around the head of the walking stick where the silver snake was and he closed his fingers and he pulled. Lucius came a step forward with the stick. Lucius's face did not change but his shoulders went very still. "You are standing close," Eric said. "I beg your pardon. You are standing close to my boy. Step back 2 paces." Lucius's eyes moved to the gloved hand on the stick. The gloved hand had bent the silver snake's tail under the pressure of the grip without any visible effort. The metal had folded as though it had been wax. "I of course," Lucius said, 2 paces. Lucius stepped back 2 paces. Eric let the stick go. The wax-haired boy was staring. Whistler had moved a half-step to Eric's right and the inside of Whistler's coat was open by a measurable amount. "A pleasure, Mr. Malfoy," Eric said. "Likewise," Lucius said, his voice now exactly the voice of a man who had decided he would write a letter later. He took his son's shoulder and turned and walked, and the silver snake at the top of his stick remained bent throughout the whole alley. Quirrell, when he was around the next bend, blew out a long breath. "Eric, What? You bent his stick. He was standing close. Eric, you bent his stick. He was standing too close. Sir, Harry said soft. Thank you, sir. Eric did not say anything to that. He put one gloved hand for a second on the top of Harry's head and then he took it off and he said they had 3 more shops and they had 2 hours to do them in and they went. That night at the foundry, after the trunk had been packed and the harness oiled and the supply list ticked, Eric brought Harry up to the 3rd floor for what he called the last drill. The 3rd floor gym had been laid out for the occasion, with the lights on every other lamp turned off and the center of the room set up as a corridor with 2 stacked benches at either end to mark walls. Eric had arranged it like a train compartment. He had Whistler at one end of the corridor with a wooden waster sword. He had Quirrell at the other end with a pillow that had been weighted with a half-brick. He had set Harry in the middle between them with his eyes closed and his hands at his sides and the harness on and the wand in the inside pocket. You are in a compartment on the train, Eric said. You are 11 years old. You are armed. The 2 ends of the compartment have been compromised. You did not see them get compromised because you had your eyes closed. The first thing they will do is come at you. The second thing they will do is not the same thing. You have to keep both ends honest at the same time and you have to do it without putting a hole in the ceiling because the boy in the compartment over yours is the son of an old friend and is asleep and does not deserve a wand burst through his bench. You ready? Yes, sir. Open your eyes. He opened his eyes. Whistler came at him with the waster. Quirrell at the same instant swung the weighted pillow. He took Whistler's waster on the cross step Eric had drilled him on in 1989. He let it run past his collarbone by a half-inch, redirected the haft with the back of his left hand, and brought his right elbow up under Whistler's wrist in a stroke that, in a real fight, would have given Whistler a broken wrist and the waster on the floor. Whistler grunted in the appreciative way he grunted when a drill went the way he had hoped it would. In the same second, Harry pivoted on the back foot and stepped inside Quirrell's swing. The pillow passed over his shoulder. He took her at the inside of the elbow with the heel of his left hand and turned her by the joint. The half-brick went into the bench wall on the wrong side of her. Quirrell, when she recovered her balance, was laughing. My God, she said. My God, he is going to be impossible at 20. He is going to be impossible, Eric said, whether at 20 or before again from the other side. They ran the drill 4 more times. The 4th time Whistler held back and watched Harry handle the pillow alone and he said, soft, if he's going to a school, the school is the lucky one. The school, Eric said, had better stay lucky. After the drill, Eric had him sit on the mat with the towel around his shoulders. Went into the storage cabinet at the back of the gym and brought out a flat wooden box. He set the box on the mat in front of Harry. He opened it. Inside the box was a slim leather wandarm sheath with a drawspring built in. Whistler made this last month, Eric said. It runs from the inside of the right forearm to the back of the right hand. Hidden, the spring throws the wand into the palm on a flex of the wrist. The flex you have to learn. You learn it tomorrow on the drive to King's Cross. You will not learn it in the school because at the school you will not have time. You will learn it tomorrow. Yes, sir. You will not in the ordinary case need to draw the wand on the spring. You will draw it slow from the inside pocket the way other students draw their wands because the spring draw is a thing nobody at the school has seen and a thing we are not going to teach anybody at the school. The spring draw is for the second case. The second case is when the wand needs to be in your hand half a second before any wizard in the room would have got their wand into theirs. Yes. Yes, sir. Eric took the sheath out of the box and slid it onto Harry's right forearm. He tightened the buckle. He guided the wand into the spring. He showed him the flex of the wrist. Harry on the 4th try threw the wand into the palm clean. He on the 5th threw it clean enough that the wand spun and settled into the grip with the working tip forward. Eric nodded. Tomorrow we work it on the move. Yes, sir. Sleep. He slept. He slept under the warm lamp Quirrell had picked for the bedroom in 1989. The harness was on the chair. The wand was on the night table. The new sheath was on his forearm. He slept the way he always slept the night before a long thing, which was deeply and without dreams. Eric on the other side of the door sat on the kitchen bench with a cup of cold coffee and the silver sword across his knees, and he watched the door for the second time in 3 years, and at first gray he was still watching it. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The first year of the Hogwarts Express was scarlet under the King's Cross light and Harry, with his trunk and his owl and the harness tight under his jumper, watched it for a half a minute from the platform before he stepped toward it. Quirrell had insisted on coming up to the barrier with him. Eric had insisted on bringing the trunk. Whistler had insisted on coming because he had said he wanted to see the school train, and the school train was as good a thing as he had ever seen on a Saturday morning. But Whistler was lying about why he had come. Whistler had come because he did not want to let go yet, and Quirrell had said as much in the car. They stood the 3 of them around him on the platform with the train hissing behind. The platform had families in it. The families looked at them and looked away. You right Sunday, Quirrell said. Sunday, and the serum, twice a day, and if you are sick, tell Madame Pomfrey it is a thyroid condition, iron supplement, take it for granted. And if she insists on knowing what it is, tell her she will have to write to my guardian. He will not write back. Good, Eric crouched. He had not crouched to Harry in a long time because Harry had grown enough that the man could speak to him at the elbow rather than at the knee, but he crouched now. He held the boy by the shoulders. He did not, in the public space, do anything that would be remembered by anyone who watched, except that he looked at the boy for the span of a breath. You know what you are. Yes, sir, you know what you carry. Yes, sir. Then go, we will come if you call. And Harry, sir, don't take orders from a man who has not earned them. Don't kill anyone you don't have to. Don't let anyone tell you who you are who has not paid for the right. Yes, sir. Eric stood. Whistler behind him was holding the trunk by the handle. He set it on the train step. He clapped Harry on the back twice with the flat of his hand. Quirrell kissed him on the forehead. Harry got on the train. He did not look back from the corridor window because he had been told not to look back. And he had decided long ago that he would take instructions from these three when they bothered to give them. But Eric on the platform stood watching the train until the last car was around the bend, and Whistler stood beside him, and Quirrell, when the train was gone, put her hand on the small of Eric's back and left it there a moment. All right, she said, all right. Let's go home. Inside the train, Harry found an empty compartment near the back. He stowed the trunk. He set the owl cage on the bench. He sat by the window with the sword along his thigh under the cloak and the wand in the inside pocket, and the small leather kit of EDTA vials in the inside breast pocket against his ribs. He looked at the platform until the platform was gone, and then he looked at the country, and then a red-headed boy stuck his head into the doorway and asked if everywhere else was full. And Harry said no, it wasn't, come in. The red-headed boy was Ron Weasley, 6th of 7 children, 2 of his brothers at the school already, all of them on the train ahead of him. He sat down across from Harry and started to talk and did not really stop for the next 4 hours, which Harry found, after about 10 minutes, to be exactly what he wanted. A sound in the compartment that did not require him to do anything other than nod and ask the occasional question. He told Harry about the brothers. He told Harry about Quidditch. He told Harry about the sandwich situation, which was poor. They split the trolley between them when the lady came round. Ron stared at the sweets with the focused desperation of a boy who had been packed corned beef sandwiches, and Harry, who had eaten in Quirrell's kitchen for 3 years on whatever Quirrell had decided was good for him, looked at the sweets with mild curiosity and bought what Ron pointed at, on the grounds that this was a thing he was supposed to do, and on the grounds that Ron's face was an excellent argument for chocolate frogs. Hermione came in about an hour out from Hogsmeade, looking for a missing toad on behalf of a boy 2 compartments down. She introduced herself in the manner of a person reading out her own credentials. She asked if they had seen the toad. They had not. She noticed the wand on the bench beside Harry where he had set it down while sorting his cards, and she said, "Oh, are you doing magic? Let me see." She did not get to see. The wand had gone back into the pocket before she had finished the sentence, because Harry had spent 3 years living with 3 people who did not display their hardware to strangers, and the wand had become hardware. Hermione blinked. Then she noticed his collar. That's a sword strap. Is that a sword strap? Yes. You're not allowed to bring a sword to school. Number a silence. Are you going to make me tell on you? I am not going to make you do anything. The strap is what you see. The blade is mine. I have a letter from my guardian on file with Professor Dumbledore. You will probably hear about it. I would prefer if you did not lead with it. She looked at him for a long moment with her brown eyes very narrow and her mouth open in the shape of a sentence she had not yet started. Then she closed the mouth. Then she opened it again. Are you Harry Potter? Yes, I read about you. Yes. All right, she said after a beat. All right. She straightened her cloak. I'll go on looking for the toad, she went. Ron across the compartment was staring. Mate. What? Mate, your dad has a silver sword. My dad's dead. Your guardian then, mate. Your guardian has a silver sword. Your guardian sent you to school with a silver sword. I want to meet your guardian. I want to be your guardian's, I don't know, his pen pal. He doesn't write letters. Mate, Harry looked at Ron. Ron was beaming. Ron was not afraid of him. Ron was not pretending. Harry had not, in 11 years, met anyone his age who was not afraid of him at the second word. And the experience was new enough that he sat with it for a long minute and watched the country pass and tried to put a name to the warmth in his chest. He did not have a name for it. He filed it under "This is good, do more of this." The Sorting Hat said in his head before it had even quite settled on his hair. Well. What, oh my, said the hat. Oh my goodness, what have we here? Just put me where you mean to put me. You are a difficult one. Brave certainly, and the courage of a particular kind. Loyal too, very loyal to a small circle. Cunning, ambitious in a way you would do well in. Don't, excuse me, don't. There are worse things than choosing. I beg your pardon, child, the hat said, somewhat affronted. You heard me. I have lived 3 years in a room with a man who can take the silver edge of his sword across a vampire's throat at half a meter without missing a beat, and he taught me how to listen. I am listening. I am telling you number, don't put me there, don't try. Are you threatening the hat, said the hat. I am informing the hat. A long, considering silence inside his skull. Very well, the hat said, very well. You are not the easiest one I have had, young man, and I will note that, but very well. Gryffindor. The hall cheered. Ron, who had been sat already, half stood at the table and clapped his hands above his head. Harry walked to the Gryffindor bench and sat and did not look at the staff table and did not look at the Slytherin table and ate when the food appeared because Quirrell had told him to eat when food appeared. He did look at the staff table once. He looked because his scar had given the small clean tug it gave when he was being looked at by a thing that knew him. The staff table held a dozen faces. One of them was a man in a purple turban with watery eyes who was talking to a man in black with hair the color of pitch and a long nose. The man in black looked back at Harry over the turbaned man's shoulder and held the look for exactly the count of 1. Then the turbaned man turned and Harry's scar bit and Harry put his hand to his forehead briefly and Ron said, mate, you all right? And Harry said, yeah, mate, I'm all right, and he went on eating. That was the first night. By the end of the first month he had a routine, up at 5:30, sword in the corridor outside the dormitory while everyone else slept, 200 cuts full form in stocking feet, down to the common room for the EDTA dose at 6, run round the lake before breakfast. Library after dinner with Hermione because Hermione had, after a week of measuring him, decided he was worth investing in, and she had set up a working pair study schedule at a back table in the library that Madame Pince did not bother. Bed at 10, wand under pillow, sword in the trunk. The teachers got him into the rhythm fast. McGonagall, the head of house, set him a column of work on the first day and watched him do it without comment. By the end of the first week, she had set him a second column on top of the first and was watching him through her spectacles in a manner that suggested she was waiting for him to falter. He did not falter. He did not show off either. He turned in the work the way Bellamy had taught him to turn in the work, which was with the answer first, the method beneath it, and the question itself in his own hand at the top of the parchment in case the marker had forgotten what they had asked. McGonagall, after the second week, stopped watching him for the falter and started watching him for what he would actually become. Flitwick in Charms was delighted with him. Harry could levitate a feather on the first day with the wand in the wrong hand, because Bellamy had taught him to drill the spell with both. Flitwick by November was setting him independent reading in the back of the classroom while the rest of the first years worked through the basic curriculum. Harry did not mind. Independent reading meant he could prop a book against the desk and run the silver edge of his thumbnail along the wand's grain while he read, which Eric had taught him to do as a hand-warming exercise and which had become a habit. Snape was the problem. Snape did not like him at first. Snape stalked into the dungeon classroom on the first day of potions and stood at the front of the room and read out the roll. And when he came to Harry's name, he paused at the surname and looked up over the parchment. Mr. Potter, he said, our new celebrity. He did not say it with admiration. He said it as a man writing a label on a jar of something he had decided to keep at a distance. Harry looked back at him with the flat, steady look Eric had taught him to use on men he did not yet know. Sir, Snape continued the roll. Then Snape, having got through to the end of the roll, looked back up over the parchment and put a series of 3 questions to Harry that he would not, by Hermione's calculation later, have put to any other first year on a first day. Bezoar, Wolfsbane, Wormhood, and Asphodel. Harry answered the first one. Bellamy had taught him Bezoar. Quirrell had told him about Asphodel because the Asphodel-Wormhood combination was a sleeping potion she had used in graduate school. Wolfsbane he did not know, he said so. I don't know, sir. You don't know? No, sir. And yet you knew the first 2. Curious distribution of knowledge in a boy of your age, Mr. Potter. My guardian taught me the first 2, sir. He did not teach me the third. I imagine he intended for you to teach me the third. There was a small silence in the dungeon. Several of the Slytherins who had been smirking stopped smirking. Snape's jaw moved a millimeter. He looked at Harry over the parchment for a long second. Indeed, Snape said. Then I shall do so. Wolfsbane is a powerful and dangerous plant. Its principal use in modern potion craft is in the stabilization of lycanthropic transformations. Mr. Weasley, write that down. Mr. Potter, you do not need to write that down, you will not forget it. Snape did not warm to him after that, and Snape did not relax around him, but Snape stopped baiting him, and Snape in particular stopped using the word celebrity. Snape's eye, when it passed over Harry in the classroom afterwards, had in it the alert, focused attention of a professional teacher who has identified a difficult pupil and decided that the difficulty is interesting. Hermione later said Snape had given Harry a kind of respect that he had not given anyone else in their year, and Harry, who did not particularly want Snape's respect, considered the assessment without comment. The pull at the scar when Quirrell crossed his eye line in a corridor or sat in his class had become a small, steady ache that he had learned to live with. Halloween came with the troll. The troll, in fact, came with Halloween, was loose in the dungeons through a small piece of theater involving Quirrell and a feint, and by the time Dumbledore had thanked everyone for their nerves and ordered the students back to their houses, Harry had counted 3 things that were wrong with the story. He counted them silently, because he had been taught not to argue with the staff in public, and he counted them as he climbed the stairs to the 7th floor with the rest of Gryffindor. It was on the 3rd floor that he and Ron and Hermione, by the root of an argument Harry had been having with Ron about Hermione and an argument Ron had been having with Harry about Hermione, fell behind, and at the moment they had fallen behind, the troll came round the corner ahead of them and into the girls' lavatory. Hermione was in the lavatory. Harry did the calculation. He did the calculation in the way Eric had drilled him to do the calculation. Mass of opponent. Estimated reach. Reach of the troll's club, length of arm, length of weapon, total swept arc about 3 meters. Mass of the troll, perhaps 800 kilos. Vital points on a troll, given the species' thick skull, perhaps the eye and perhaps the soft palate. Available weapons, the wand, the sword, the fact that Ron was beside him and was capable of casting Wingardium Leviosa. He did not say any of it aloud. He said, "Ron, levitate the club on my mark. Hermione, get against the wall behind the cubicle." Ron, who had not seen Harry give an order before, gave one in return. Yeah. The troll was already lifting its club. Harry went in low. The sword came out from under the cloak in the same motion as the step. He took the troll across the back of the right knee, not to cut it through, because his blade was not long enough to cut a troll's leg through, but to score the tendon, and the tendon, being the same tendon a troll had as any other large-jointed creature, did what tendons do when they are scored. The troll roared and dropped that knee. The club on the way down did not finish its swing. Ron, Wingardium Leviosa. The club lifted out of the troll's hand. The troll, with one knee down, looked up. Harry came round to its face. The troll's face was the size of a small table and was made of the same gray rough stuff as the floor of the lavatory. The eye on the left was a small black bead. He put the wand in his left hand and the sword in his right. He said calmly in the voice Eric had taught him to use, "Sleep." He did not say the word as a spell, he said it as an instruction. He gave the troll the pommel of the sword on the temple, very hard on the swing of his own weight with the pivot off the back leg. The troll between the dropped knee and the temple went down. It went down in 2 stages, first the shoulders and then the head. The floor accepted it. The club hit the floor a second later when Ron lowered his wand. In the silence that followed, Hermione came out from behind the cubicle. She stood and looked at the troll. She looked at Harry. She looked at the sword. She closed her eyes a full second. She opened them. "Right," she said. "Right. Your guardian," she said, "did teach you well." "Yes. I will not say anything. All right." It was at exactly this moment that McGonagall came through the door, and behind her Snape, and behind Snape Quirrell. McGonagall opened her mouth. Hermione, before McGonagall could say a word, stepped forward and said, in a voice she had practiced in her head twice on the walk over, "Professor, I was looking for the troll because I had read about them and I thought I could deal with it on my own, and Harry and Ron came to fetch me back, and the troll cornered me and they saved my life. I'm very sorry." McGonagall looked at her hard, then McGonagall looked at the troll, then McGonagall looked at the cut along the back of the troll's knee, then McGonagall looked at Harry. "Mr. Potter. Ma'am, where did you learn that strike?" "From my guardian, ma'am, and the weapon. Mine on file with the headmaster, letter sent in August." McGonagall held his eye a long second, then she said, very dry, 5 points to Miss Granger for sheer dumb luck. 5 points to Mr. Weasley for a serviceable levitation charm in conditions of distress. 5 points, Mr. Potter, to Gryffindor for not killing the school's troll, although I notice you considered it. "Yes, ma'am." Off to bed, all 3. They went. Snape on the way out watched Harry sheath the sword. He did not say anything. His eye stayed on the harness under the cloak, and on the way Harry adjusted the harness with the back of his hand, and he had a thoughtful look the rest of the night. Quidditch was easy because Quidditch was a thing Eric had not built him for, and yet Eric had built him for it without meaning to. The reflex on the broom was the reflex he had on the mat. He saw the snitch on the first try because his eyes had been trained to see small moving things at the edge of his peripheral vision, and he caught it on the 3rd practice in a roll that put him under the broom for half a second and back on top of it before the Slytherin seeker had finished the gasp. Wood, the captain, looked at him after that practice with an expression that, in Wood, came close to religious feeling. The first game went the way the first game went. He caught the snitch in the mouth in the middle of a stall because his broom went sideways for 30 seconds, and he chose not to fall off. He spat the snitch into Madam Hooch's palm at the end and went off the pitch with the team, while Hermione in the stands had the receipts of Snape having muttered a curse into his own teacup throughout, and the fact of Quirrell having muttered a counter into his. "I told you it was Snape," Ron said in the common room that night. "It wasn't Snape," Harry said. "Mate, Hermione saw him." Hermione saw Snape muttering. Hermione also saw Quirrell muttering. The broom destabilized when Snape was muttering. The broom righted when Snape was muttering. The two events are not the same. Snape was countering, Quirrell was cursing. Hermione, who had been about to disagree, did not. Christmas at Hogwarts was the first Christmas Harry had spent outside the foundry. He had written to the three of them and they had written back. Quirrell had sent a tin of biscuits. Whistler had sent a small package containing 2 replacement EDTA vials and a folded note that said "See you in June, son." And Eric had not sent anything but had Whistler put into the package a length of black cord, exactly the length Harry's right wrist had been the previous June, which meant the next harness was already being built. He found the mirror on a corridor he had not meant to be in on a Tuesday after dinner because he had been looking for Mrs. Norris and had been moving the way Eric had taught him, soft along the wall, ducking the moving staircase as it came round. The mirror was in an unused classroom behind a door that was not properly locked. He stood in front of it. He saw Lily and James behind him. He had seen photographs. He recognized them. Lily's hand on his shoulder. James's hand on Lily's shoulder. He saw also behind them Whistler. Whistler had a hand on James's shoulder. He saw Quirrell. Quirrell was beside Whistler. He saw Eric. Eric was behind Quirrell. Eric's hand was on Quirrell's shoulder. The chain of them ran back away into the mirror. The chain of them was a family. He sat in front of the mirror for a long time. He did not cry. He had decided long ago that he would not cry in front of any mirror that did not work both ways, and this one did not work both ways. But he sat for the whole evening and into the night, and he looked at the faces in turn, and he memorized them. And when he heard the soft tread of someone in the corridor behind him, he did not start. Dumbledore came into the room. "Harry, sir, I see you have found the mirror of Arist." "Sir." Dumbledore sat on the bench opposite. He did not sit close. He gathered his beard onto his chest with one long, careful hand, and he looked at Harry in the manner of a chess player thinking through a position. "It shows the deepest desire of the viewer," Dumbledore said. "Yes, sir. What do you see?" "My family, sir. Living. All of them, sir." A long quiet. Dumbledore's eye on him over the half-moons. "All of them is a great many people, Harry." "Yes, sir. You did not used to have so many." "No, sir. And now you do." "Yes, sir." "I am glad of it. The mirror, Harry, is going to be moved in the morning. It is dangerous. Men have wasted away in front of it. You will not, I think, waste away in front of it. But I should rather not give you the opportunity." "Yes, sir." Dumbledore stood. At the door he turned. "Harry, sir, your guardian, Mr. Brooks, sir, is formidable. The letter he sent me in August was, I confess, the most efficient letter I have received from a parent in 20 years. Yes, sir. I should like to meet him in June. He will come if you ask, sir." "Good," Dumbledore said. "Good. Get some sleep, Harry." It was after Easter that the corridor matter came to a head. Harry had pieced it together as Hermione had pieced it together, and as Hagrid had not stopped giving them pieces. There was a stone, Flamel Stone, the long life in gold stone, locked in a series of chambers behind a corridor on the 3rd floor. There was a thing trying to get to it. Hermione thought the thing was Snape. Harry did not. Harry knew the thing was the thing on the back of Quirrell's head under the turban because Harry's scar had not let him forget for 9 months. He told Hermione. He told Ron. He told them the night they all three sat in the common room after curfew, and Ron's chess board was set up between them with all the pieces still in their starting positions, because none of them had felt like a game. "You're saying," Hermione said slowly, "that he is carrying a piece of the Dark Lord on the back of his head." "Yes, that should not be possible. It is the same kind of thing that lives in me." A long silence. "In you?" "Yes, I carry a piece. He carries a piece. We are in our way the same kind of parasite host. I have been trained to live with mine. He has not. He has invited his to drive." "Harry." "Yes. Harry, I do not know what to do with what you have just told me." "Tell McGonagall." "I have told her 3 times already." "Tell her a 4th time. She has gone to London tonight. She will not be back until morning. Find Snape. Tell Snape." "Snape, I think, also knows. Snape has been trying to head him off." "And you?" "I am going through the 3rd floor corridor tonight. He has gone in already. I felt him go in at supper. He will be down through the chambers by midnight." "Harry, you will not. You will tell a professor." "I have just told you to tell a professor. I am going." "Ron." "Yeah. Are you coming?" "Mate, I am coming." "You don't have to. Mate, you're not going alone." Hermione closed her eyes a moment. She opened them. She said, "I am also coming." "All right." The chambers were as Hermione's reading had suggested. The dog, the devil's snare, the keys, the chest, the troll already dead at the doorway, the potions. They got through. Ron took a knight to the head and was down at the chessboard. Hermione bound up his shoulder and stayed because the bottle that went on past the potions was a 1-person bottle. Harry took it. The last chamber had the mirror. Quirrell was in front of it. He turned when Harry came in. His turban was gone. The thing on the back of his head was a face, thin, gone the color of dirty milk, with slits for nostrils and eyes that did not have whites. The face was wet. It looked at Harry, and the scar on Harry's forehead lit up in a clean, clear line of heat, and the face spoke. "Harry Potter?" "Yes," Harry said. "Hello." He drew the wand with the left and the silver dagger with the right. He had not brought the sword down into the chambers because the sword would not have fitted through the second door. He had brought the silver dagger that Whistler had ground out of the hilt of a broken Roman gladius the previous winter and had honed for him to a profile thin enough to slide between two ribs without complaining. "You have come to give me the stone," the face said. "Number, come, Harry. You have come to give me the stone. Look in the mirror. The mirror will show you where it is. Give it to me." "No," Harry said, "you do not understand. The thing inside you is the thing inside me. We are the same, we belong together, come." "I have spent 3 years," Harry said, soft, "with a man who is also the same thing. He is not you, you are not me." Quirrell took a step forward. The face on the back of his head, which had been facing Harry the wrong way round, gave a wet sound of impatience. Quirrell, hands lifting, began the gesture for a curse. Harry let the wand fall from the left hand to the floor. He did not need the wand, he needed the laugh. He had been practicing the laugh for 2 years. Bellamy had said the ridiculous required the laugh to be honest. He looked at the wet face under the back of Quirrell's bald skull. He looked at the way the man's hands shook. He looked at the absurdity, the small, ugly absurdity of the most powerful dark wizard of the age, parked on the back of a stuttering defense professor's neck like a roosting bat that did not have a tree of its own. He laughed. He did not have to fake it. The laugh, when it came, was a real laugh low in his chest, and it came up his throat clean, and it came out his mouth. "Ridiculous," he said. The face on the back of Quirrell's head sprouted, very briefly, the pink and yellow striped party hat of a child's birthday cake. The hat had a little paper rose on the front of it. The hat sat on the bone above the eye slits at a jaunty angle. The face shrieked. The shriek broke Quirrell's curse before he had finished it. In the half-second the curse hung unfinished in the air, Harry crossed the floor of the chamber. He covered the distance in 3 strides. He took Quirrell at the base of the throat with his left hand hard, and he put the silver dagger in under Quirrell's chin and up through the soft of the palate and into the brain pan with the right. It was a clean death. Eric had taught him the angle. Quirrell went down. The face on the back of his head burned where the silver had passed through, and the burn ran across the back of the skull like a fuse. And then the face came off the bone in a sheet of dirty smoke. The smoke gathered, the smoke became briefly a thing. The thing screamed at him, the thing did not have the time to settle into a shape. Harry, on the floor where he had gone down with Quirrell, picked up his wand again. He pointed the wand at the smoke. Ridiculous. The smoke became a chicken. The chicken landed on the floor with both feet. The chicken stared at him with the small round eye of a thing that has been recently changed. Harry laughed at it because he could not help it. And the chicken, registering the laugh, ran in a circle and fled out of the door of the chamber and up the passage. And the laugh of the boy on the floor behind it followed it out. He sat against the wall after that for a long while. He pulled the stone out of his own pocket because he had felt it slip there when he had looked into the mirror, and he set it on his knee, and he sat with the wand across his thighs and the dagger across his other thigh, and he waited. Dumbledore came down the passage at a run. Harry woke up in the hospital wing on a Tuesday morning with sun on his face. He did not remember coming up out of the chambers. He remembered Dumbledore picking him up. He remembered Dumbledore's robes smelling of pipe tobacco and lemon. He remembered Hermione in the corridor, crying once and then setting her jaw. Dumbledore was beside the bed when he woke. "Harry, sir, you did well last night, sir. The chicken, I gather, is in the kitchens. The house elves have made friends with it. It seems content, sir. You used a silver weapon, Harry. Yes, sir, on a man, sir, who had given his neck to a parasite. I am not arguing with you, Harry, I am noting it. Madame Pomfrey has been told that the wound on your forehead is a thyroid condition flaring under stress. She has not pressed. Thank you, sir." Dumbledore sat on the edge of the bed. "Harry, sir, the thing on the back of Quirrell's head. Sir, you and I will have a conversation about the thing on the back of Quirrell's head before you leave for the summer. Not now, you are tired, but before." "Yes, sir. And Harry, sir, your guardian, Mr. Brooks, I should very much like to meet him in June, as I said in December. I should perhaps like to meet him before. He is in Detroit, sir. Then I shall write." "He will not write back, sir." "I know," Dumbledore said, "but I shall write anyway." He stood. He put a hand for a second on Harry's hair. The hand was warm. The hand smelled again of lemon. Then he went, and the door closed, and Harry lay for a long while in the hospital wing with the sun on his face and his eye on the ceiling, and he understood somewhere under his sternum that he had ended the year exactly as Eric had asked him to. He had not let any man who had not earned it tell him who he was. He slept. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. La Magra in Hogsmeade. The blood bank was 3 stories underground beneath a private members' club in St. James's, and the man who owned the club was Deacon Frost. The club at street level was a dull beige stone facade with no name above the door and a brass plate beside the bell that said, in raised capitals so polite they whispered themselves, 4 members. Inside the door, the entrance hall had a coat check and a porter's lodge and a green-shaded lamp on a black mahogany counter. The carpet was the color of port wine. The wallpaper was the color of an autumn rose. Two doormen in evening dress stood inside the inner doors and pretended to read newspapers. The newspapers were 3 weeks old. The men were not reading. In the basement of the club, behind a paneled door that gave to a brass key carried by precisely 4 employees, there were stairs. The stairs went down a long way. The stairs were laid in a dark stone that did not quite look like granite and did not quite look like marble and held the cold of a place that had decided centuries before that warmth was an indulgence it would not permit. The stairs turned twice and ended at a vaulted chamber the size of a small swimming bath, ceilinged in the same dark stone, lit by gas mantles set into the columns at intervals. The vaulted chamber held the bank. The bank was a single long room of low temperature and high humidity, with 3 rows of upright steel cabinets sealed with rubber gaskets and tagged in copperplate. The cabinets held blood. The blood was not on tap. The blood was bagged and racked and labeled and dated and graded. The grading was by source. Source A was British human, healthy, urban draw, average age 40. Source B was British human, healthy, rural draw, average age 32. Source C was British human, unhealthy, urban draw, miscellaneous. Source D was the desirable one. Source D was wizard. Source D had its own cabinet. Source D was lit from above by a separate dedicated gas mantle that was a different color, a faint violet rather than gold, because Frost liked the theater. Source D was bagged in a paler bag, a creamy rather than red rubber, because the blood within behaved differently from the others and the bag had to be whiter. Source D commanded a different price. Source D was sold not to the ordinary clients of the bank, but to a specific subset of those clients who paid in galleons and arrived under cloaks, and presented at the inner door a small thing carved of bone that meant they had business with the lower trade. Frost stood between the columns on the night of the 3rd Sunday of April in 1993, with one hand on the brass of the cabinet rail and the other on the silver-banded ebony of his cane, and he looked along the row of cabinets with an expression that had once, in his youth before he had stopped being entirely warm, been called a smile. He was tall. He was sallow. He had hair the color of unbleached cotton and eyes the color of a knife at dusk. He wore a single-breasted black suit with a violet handkerchief in the breast pocket and patent shoes that did not catch the light. He had not slept. He did not need to sleep. He had been awake since 1873. Beside him stood a man named Reinhardt, an old retainer from Frost's Berlin days who carried, by reputation, the slowness of his master with the cruelty taken out and the resentment left in. Reinhardt was reading from a clipboard. Source D shipment last week, sir, 12 liters. Source D shipment this week, 18 liters. We have been receiving an increasing volume since Borgen and Burke's was closed and our procurement network rerouted through the Nocturn alternates. 5 years that took us. 5 years to reroute around the Dartford incident. Did you have to count it, Reinhardt? You asked, sir, in October that I keep a tally. And so you do, and so the tally annoys me. Go on. Clients have requested an additional half-liter per week per account from Source D. They have offered an additional premium. 3 accounts have indicated they will, if we cannot fulfill the order, change supplier. Change to whom? There is, sir, no other supplier. The threat is empty. Then we charge them double the premium. We charge them double and we tell them we are very sorry for the difficulty and that we are improving our extraction processes to better serve them. We tell them this with a small bow. They will pay it. They will say to each other in the next club how barbaric our pricing is. They will not change supplier because they cannot. Yes, sir, and the ritual. Walpurgis night, sir, 2 weeks. We have secured the location. And the location is Hogsmeade. As you instructed, sir, the Shrieking Shack. Frost smiled. The smile on Frost was a thing assembled out of pieces of other smiles he had collected from other people in earlier centuries. It did not warm his face. It did not warm anyone else's. The Shrieking Shack, he repeated. What a small, ugly, absurd name. The wizarding mind is so very provincial, Reinhardt. They have a building that has been the site of magical pain for 130 years, a stone-bound focus of pain, exactly the kind of focus a serious ritualist would walk 1,000 miles to find, and they have called it a shack. They have called it a shack because they once heard at one of its windows a noise they did not like. They have boarded its windows. They have told their children it is haunted. They have called it a shack. Yes, sir, bring me the chosen one. Yes, sir, Reinhardt went. He returned a half-minute later with a young man on his arm. The young man was about 20. He was a wizard drawn from one of the prison houses up north because Frost did not waste Source D on his own ceremonies. He used B-grade for those, and not even the best B. The young man was Imperiused. His eyes were the color of dirty pond water and his mouth hung at the corner. He was barefoot. He was wearing a hospital gown. He will serve as the vessel, Reinhardt said. Sir. Yes, he will serve. He has a wizard's blood and a wizard's flesh, and a wizard's death will go on the altar, and the spirit of La Magra will be fed and rise. The blood god will rise into me. He said the next sentence without raising his voice and without irony, because Frost, for all the dryness of his Berlin cruelty, had a real religious enthusiasm in him for La Magra, a thing he had read about in the Codex Atreides in 1881 and had been working toward in one cellar or another since 1903. I will rise. I will rise, Reinhardt, into a thing that no longer asks. No longer asks for blood, no longer asks for sleep, no longer asks for dispensation from the sun. I will simply be. Yes, sir. And then I will burn the wizards. They have offered me their trade. I have accepted their trade. I will burn them last. I will burn them once I have the rest. Yes, sir. 200 miles north at Hogwarts, Harry was 13 years old and was in the middle of his third year and had not slept properly for a week. He had not slept because the scar on his forehead, dormant most nights since the chambers in his first year, had begun to itch again. The itch had begun in late March. It was not the bright, clean burn the scar had done when the parasite had been close. It was a different itch. It was the itch of a tooth that had been disturbed 2 streets away. It was the itch of a thing that the scar recognized as kin, but did not, on this go, identify as the same source. He had written to Eric on the 7th night, and Eric had written back on the 9th with the curt directness of a man who did not waste a postage stamp. Stay in the school, watch your hands, keep the harness on under the robe at dinner. Tell me what the scar feels like in detail. Harry had told him. He had described the itch as if describing a wound to a doctor. He had said, not the parasite, different, sweet, not foul, heavier, not thinner, something south of here, something below. Eric had written back a 3rd time, and the 3rd letter had been one line, hold position. We come. He had held position. The school did not know he was holding any position at all. Hermione, who had become Hermione the Relentless over the 2 years between the chambers and the present sentence, noticed. Hermione noticed because Hermione always noticed. Harry, yes, you're holding the wand under the table while you eat. Yes, why, habit. Harry, you do not have that habit. You hold the wand when there is something to point it at. There is not just now anything to point it at. You are pointing it at the table. Why? There's something coming. Where? Below. She did not press him for the rest of breakfast. After breakfast, on the way to Transfiguration, she said in the corridor, if you are not going to tell me, I will work it out on my own and you will not like the way I work it out. All right, there's a thing in London, a man, the kind of man Eric and Whistler hunt. He is heading north, to Hogwarts, to Hogsmeade. And the difference matters. To us, number to him, yes, he thinks Hogsmeade is a small, ugly, absurd name and he is going to make use of it. What is he going to do? A ritual, Walpurgis Night, that's in 2 weeks. Yes, Harry, why have you not told McGonagall? Because McGonagall, much as I love McGonagall, would close the school early and would put 20 kids onto the Hogwarts Express and would send them south through London, which is exactly where I do not want them. The ritual needs a wizarding vessel. 20 kids on a train through London at the right hour are 20 potential vessels. I am better off holding them here behind the wards. And Dumbledore. Dumbledore is on a Wisengamot trip in Bern until the 28th. I have already written to Snape. You've written to Snape. Snape is in London. Snape has been in London for 2 months. Snape is, in his own peculiar way, my best chance of cutting Frost off down there. Eric is coming up, Quirrell is coming with Eric, Whistler is staying south to coordinate. You have a plan, I have a plan. Why am I only hearing about it now? Because I did not want you in it. Harry, you absolutely do. All right, yes, I do be in it. She did not for once reply with a long sentence. She nodded. They went into Transfiguration. McGonagall did not notice anything except that Harry's hands under his desk were not where they had been the day before. Eric and Quirrell arrived on the Hogsmeade-bound train on the 29th at 3:15 in the afternoon. They came up as Mr. and Mrs. Brooks. They had a room booked at the Three Broomsticks under the name. Quirrell was carrying a hardshell case that, to the eye of Madame Rosmerta who logged the booking, contained a violin. The case did not contain a violin. The case contained a tactical auto shotgun broken at the breech and packed in foam and a flask of EDTA serum in a side pocket. Eric had the sword in a long flat tube wrapped in brown paper that he had told Rosmerta was a fishing rod. Rosmerta, who was a woman who had seen many things, did not insist on inspecting the rod. Harry met them at the inn at 4 o'clock. He came down from the castle on the Hogsmeade weekend pass with Ron and Hermione, who waited for him in the Three Broomsticks while he went up to the room. He knocked twice slow and once fast. Eric opened the door. Eric had not in 18 months hugged him. He hugged him now, briefly, with the particular careful pressure of a man who knew his own strength and would not use the full of it on a 13-year-old. Sir. Son, sit. He sat. Quirrell behind Eric was kneeling beside the violin case and assembling the shotgun. She looked up. Harry, Quirrell, you've grown. A bit, not much. You eat enough. I eat enough. She came over and took his face between her hands and looked at his eyes. She nodded once. She went back to the shotgun. Eric sat on the edge of the bed. He had the map of Hogsmeade spread on the bedspread and a pencil mark on the building marked Shrieking Shack in the cartographer's hand. Tell me about the building. It hasn't been opened for 30 years. The villagers think it's haunted. It's actually been the transformation site for a werewolf who used to be a student, but the werewolf, last I heard, is in Romania. The entrance from the village is boarded up. The other entrance is a tunnel from the grounds. The tunnel begins under a tree on the edge of the forest. The tree is a whooping willow. It hits people who get near it. There is a knot on the trunk that, when pressed with a stick, freezes the tree for 60 seconds. You've been in. Number Bellamy briefed me on it last summer. Good, take us in tonight through the tunnel. Frost is in there. I want to count the room. I want to mark the corners. I want to know what we walk into in 24 hours. We do not engage tonight. We count tonight and we engage tomorrow. All right. You are coming because you know the tunnel and because your scar is what is telling us how close we are. You are not engaging tonight. Yes. Yes. Quirrell counts the second sweep with us. Then she goes back to the inn and waits for the Daywalker squad. Whistler has them on a Friday ferry. They are at Malag at dawn. They will be at the village edge by tomorrow noon. How many? 6. And the village? The village we keep clear. The shack is on the outskirts. The villagers will not hear us at the shack. The wards on the school will not feel us at the shack. The ritual is the issue. If the ritual completes, the issue is no longer the shack. The issue is everything within a 5-mile radius of the shack, which includes the school. Yes. All right, eat. Tell me about him in detail. What did the scar tell you? They did the count that night. They went out at 11:30. The 3 of them, Harry in his school cloak with the harness and the sword and the wand, Eric in dark workman's clothes with the harness under and a silenced pistol at his hip, and the silver cord stake on a quick-draw clip, Quirrell in a long coat with the auto shotgun under it. They crossed the grounds along the path Harry had walked twice with Hagrid and once with Sirius Black's name being yelled by the night staff, and they came to the whooping willow. Harry tapped the knot with a long branch he had picked up. The willow froze. They went down. The tunnel under the willow ran east, twisting, with timber shoring along the first 20 meters and then no shoring at all, just bare earth. The air smelled of damp wood, of a long cold hearth, and the further in they went, of the dead flower sweetness Eric had taught Harry to recognize in the lab in 1990. Eric's hand on Harry's shoulder tightened a degree when the sweetness came up. You're getting it, Eric said. Yes. Stop 50 meters before the cellar. We need to count without being heard. Yes, they stopped. They knelt. Quirrell's hands moved over the shotgun in the dark in the way her hands had moved over 100 other pieces of equipment in 100 other rooms, and her breathing did not change. Eric took out a small mirror on a folding rod. He pushed it round the bend in the tunnel ahead of them. He held it for a long 30 seconds. He drew the mirror back. 11, he murmured, plus Frost, plus Reinhardt at his shoulder, plus the vessel on a slab, plus 4 braziers at compass points. The braziers are not lit at the ritual. Layout. Octagonal floor, stone, old, pillars at 4 of the 8 points, the slab in the center, the braziers at the other 4 points. Frost stands at the eastern pillar. The chosen one is on the slabs. The other 11 are scattered along the perimeter. They are dressed for ceremony. They are not armed. Armed how? They are armed with their hands and their teeth, which is enough for 11 of them against the 3 of us tonight, not enough for the 3 of us plus the squad tomorrow. Where do we come in? 2 entries. Quirrell and the squad through the village door frontal, you, me, and the wand through the tunnel behind. The ritual requires a circle. The circle requires Frost to stand inside it. The ritual is interrupted if the circle is broken. We break the circle. We break the circle by putting a body across the perimeter. The body can be ours. The body can be Frost's. I would prefer it to be Frost's. Yes, we pull back. They pulled back. The tunnel went the other way as quietly as it had come. The willow accepted the second tap on the knot. They walked the grounds back the way they had come. Quirrell at the back walked sweep. Eric walked beside Harry. He did not put his arm around the boy. He did not need to. The walk was the arm. Walpurg is night. The squad arrived under the noon sun in the village in 2 unmarked vans that had been driven up from Hull through the night. 6 men and women got out and walked into the 3 broomsticks looking like a hill walking club and ordered 6 plowmen's lunches and ate them and went up the stairs. They did not speak in the dining room. They did not need to. They had worked together for 6 years and they could communicate by the way one of them set down a cup. By 2 o'clock they were in the room with Eric and Quirrell and were checking weapons. By 4 o'clock they were down the village toward the shack. By 8 o'clock the village square was dark. By 10 o'clock the windows of the Shrieking Shack, boarded though they were, leaked a low violet light across the patch of weeds outside. The ritual had begun. Inside, Frost stood between the eastern pillar and the slab. He had taken off the patent shoes and the suit. He wore a long dark robe with the silver-banded ebony cane in his hand. He had drawn, in his own blood from a small cut on his thumb, the 3rd concentric circle around the slab. The chosen one lay on the slab in the hospital gown, breathing slowly under the Imperious. The braziers at the 4 cardinal points burned now, and the smoke that came up out of them was the color of the gas mantles in the bank in St. James's. 11 of his attendants stood around the perimeter, hooded, hands clasped at the waist, mouths a fraction open in the way that mouths went a fraction open when their owners had not breathed in 100 years. Frost lifted the cane. The cane was no longer a cane. The cane was the bone wand he had assembled in 1903 out of the femur of a Czech necromancer whose last words had been, "Give it to him and run." Frost had given it to himself. Frost had not run. "Brothers, sisters," Frost said. The squad came through the village door of the shack at exactly that moment. The door was a board-bolted thing 4 inches thick that had not been opened in 50 years. The board-bolted thing did not survive the breach charge Quirrell had taped to the center hinge. The door went in across the front room of the shack and into the next door and through that, and the squad came up out of the dust behind it with UV flash sticks raised. The first UV flashed through a sheet of white-violet light across the perimeter of the ritual chamber, and 4 of the 11 attendants caught the wash and went under. They did not have time to shriek. They went under as paper under a torch. The smoke they made was thin and gray and rolled along the ceiling. Frost turned. Frost did not flinch. Frost lifted his bone wand and the violet smoke around him gathered into his free hand and condensed. In the tunnel from below, Eric kicked the cellar door open. He went in first. Harry came in 2 paces behind him with the sword drawn in the right hand and the wand in the left and the EDTA dose taken half an hour ago humming clean through his pulse. The remaining attendants, the 7 who had not gone down in the UV flash, came round at the cellar door and met Eric. Eric did not slow. The fight in the cellar happened the way the fights in the cellar always happened when Eric was in them. It was not a thing that could be watched in detail because the eye did not have the speed for the watching. Eric moved through the 7 of them with the silver-edged sword and the silence pistol in tandem, and the silence pistol did the work the silver-edged sword could not get to fast enough, and in 7 seconds there were no attendants between him and the center of the room. Whistler had built the silencer himself in 1986 to a tolerance that did not exist in any catalog. The silencer behaved. The 7 of them behind Eric were a long line of small heaps on the cellar floor that were beginning, in the way of their kind, to come undone into dust. Frost saw Eric. Frost smiled. The smile on Frost after a century of practice was a thing that he had got down to a particular knife edge. "Eric, my old enemy, Frost, you have brought a boy with you." "Yes, a wizard boy. Yes, then you have brought me my vessel. You have saved me the trouble of using this one." Frost gestured at the imperiused man on the slab. "Yes," Eric said, I have brought you a vessel who will not have you." Eric stepped to the right. He did it slowly. He did it to draw Frost's eye. Frost's eye, for a beat, followed Eric. In that beat, Harry crossed the perimeter of the ritual circle. The circle, broke. The violet light at the 4 braziers went out. The smoke gathering in Frost's hand fell in a thin gray rain. Frost's mouth opened. The wand in his hand came up. Frost was a duelist of a certain rank. Frost had been a duelist for 90 years. He had fought wizards before and had killed 9 of them, and he had a particular curse he had developed for the dispatch of wizards. He began the curse. Harry, on the inside of the broken circle, had the wand in the left hand and the sword in the right. He did not bother with the curse counter Bellamy had drilled him on in 1990. The curse counter was a thing for fighting at a distance. He was not at a distance. He stepped under Frost's wand arm with the pivot Eric had taught him in 1989. He came up inside Frost's reach with the sword in the line Eric had drilled him on at the foundry in 1990, and again at the cottage in 1991, and again 3 times a week for the last 2 years. The silver edge took Frost across the chest at the angle of the heart. Frost looked down at the blade. He looked up at Harry. He had the look of a man who had been hit by the kind of move he had not seen since 1898 and had assumed had been forgotten. "You," he said. "Yes," Harry said. He drove the blade in another inch on the half-turn with his shoulder behind it. He cleared the rib on the way through. The point of the blade came out past Frost's shoulder blade. Frost said, soft, with the small black blood beginning to come up at his mouth, "I knew your guardian. I knew him before he was a man. I knew the woman who carried him. I bit her." Harry did not let him finish. He had been taught by Eric that long villains had long speeches and that long speeches were a courtesy a hunter was not obliged to give. He withdrew the blade and put it in again, this time at the throat, and the silver of the edge crossed the vertebra at the second join. Frost's head came off above the cervical line. The body dropped. The body did not go to dust. The body lay. Eric, 2 paces away, did not lower his pistol. Eric had not lowered his pistol since coming through the cellar door. He fired 3 rounds, silenced, into the chest of the body on the floor, and the body on the 3rd round conceded to the ordinary process of unmaking. In the dust behind Frost, the bone wand fell. The wand had been the femur of a man who had not deserved the use it had been put to, and the femur, freed of its master, lay quiet on the stone. Harry, after a half-second, knelt and picked it up. He set it across his palms. He stood. He walked across the cellar to the slab where Quirrell, who had come down from the village door with the rest of the squad, was easing the imperieused man into a sitting position. Harry handed the bone to Quirrell. "For the kit," he said, "for the kit. Catalog it, bury the bone when we're done. The man it belonged to should not be carrying around any longer." Quirrell nodded. She slid the bone into the inside pocket of her coat. In the upper room of the shack, where the boards had been taken in by the squad's breach, the squad had begun to lay out the contents of Frost's procurement ledger. The ledger had been on Reinhardt, and Reinhardt had been the last to fall to the UV flash, and the ledger had survived him. It was bound in dark green leather and ran to 400 pages. The names in it were a directory of the wealthy of 3 continents. Eric sat on a broken chair and turned the pages with his gloved hand and did not speak for the better part of 10 minutes. Then he closed the book. "This," he said, "we are going to use." "Sir," Harry said. "Yes." "What do we do about the wizards in it?" "The wizards in it," Eric said, "are the names of the men your headmaster has been telling us in his letters are his great concern. The men who have been the silent backers of your trouble in the long meanwhile. They have been paying Frost for blood. Their names are on the ledger. The ledger is going to your headmaster. The headmaster will know what to do with it on his side. We will continue on our side with what we know how to do." "Yes. Yes, good." Eric looked up at him. He looked at the boy who had taken Frost's head off at 13 and had handed Quirrell the femur after with a courtesy. He looked for a long second. "Son." "Sir." "That was a clean kill. You will not, I hope, do that work for the rest of your life. But that was a clean kill." He nodded, the head nod. The boy received the head nod the way the boy received all things that mattered, without comment. In the wreckage of the shack, the squad moved in the small, precise way they always moved at the end of an operation, bagging dust, photographing the floor, sealing the cellar. Quirrell, on the slab side, talked to the freed man in a low voice and brought him a cup of water from a flask. The man was beginning to come back to himself. The night outside the broken doors was very dark, and the sky over Hogsmeade was, for the first time in a long while in Harry's experience, free of any pressure he could feel under his scar. They sat in the upper room of the 3 broomsticks at 3 in the morning with the ledger open on the table between them and a single oil lamp on it. Rosmerta had been told to go to bed at midnight. She had gone. The squad had bedded down on the 2nd floor. Quirrell was in the chair beside the table with her boots off and her feet pulled up under her. Eric was at the table opposite Harry. Harry had a mug of tea between his hands. He had not drunk it. He had been looking at the ledger. The ledger had a long list of wizarding names. Some of the names he knew. Lucius Malfoy was on the 2nd page, with a column of dates and a column of figures running down the right side of the page. The figures were not in pounds. The figures were in galleons. Lucius Malfoy had been buying 12 liters of Source D blood a week for 14 years. He had not been buying it for himself. Lucius Malfoy was a wizard. Wizards did not drink blood. Lucius Malfoy had been buying it as broker. The names of the buyers Lucius had brokered for were noted in Reinhardt's small, careful hand in the margin. A cluster of old pureblood houses with cabinets of unwell elderly relatives who had not been seen by the public in decades. There was, on page 6 of the ledger, a separate column for what Frost had called consultancy. The consultancy retainer was paid to 1 client. The client was listed by initial only. The initial was TMR. Eric turned the page. He turned to page 7, he turned to page 8, he stopped at page 9. "Snape." "Sir, Snape's name is in this ledger." Harry, on his side of the table, did not move his face. He had been waiting for Eric to find it. "Yes, sir, in a column of his own." "Yes, sir, buying, but not for himself. The buyer is the column. The receiver is the marginal note. Look at the margin." Eric looked at the margin. The margin in Reinhardt's hand said, "Werewolf at Hogwarts, Wolfsbane's supply chain. Source acquired for legitimate purchase against Hogwarts ledger." "He has been," Eric said, "buying werewolf supplies through Frost's bank. He has been buying Wolfsbane potion ingredients through a vendor who, on paper, was Frost's bank." Snape knew. Snape has been writing to Dumbledore for 2 months about it. Snape's name in this ledger is the name of a man who, for the last 2 months, has been pulling on a thread on his side from London while we have been pulling on the same thread from the north. He is on our side, sir. I would not have written to him otherwise. "You did not tell me you had written to him." "No, sir." A long quiet. "You should have." "Yes, sir, I should have." "You don't run an op with a contact I do not know about, ever." "Yes." "Yes, sir, apart from that, sir." "Apart from that, son, that was a very good piece of work tonight. Snape on a thread on his end and you on a thread on yours and Eric and Quirrell and the squad on the line between. That is the way we do this work. That is the way we do it for the rest of our careers. You are old enough to be in the room when the planning happens, but you are not old enough yet to keep one of the contacts to yourself. We do this together." "Yes, sir. Yes." Quirrell on the chair had not spoken throughout. She spoke now. "The ledger to Dumbledore, tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, Whistler will run a photographic copy at the lab. The original goes to Dumbledore at breakfast. The photographic copy goes into the kit we share with Dumbledore. We do not share with the Ministry. The Ministry, on the basis of half the names in this ledger, is not in a condition to receive the share. Agreed, Quirrell said. Eric closed the ledger. He set his hand on the cover a moment. He looked at Harry over the table. Son, sir, go to bed. Harry went to bed. In the room down the corridor, Eric and Quirrell sat at the table a long while longer with the ledger between them and did not speak much. And outside, at the edge of the village, the boards on the shrieking shack stirred in a light wind. And the whooping willow at the edge of the forest accepted the dawn the way it accepted any other dawn. And the school, 400 yards uphill, slept the way the school had slept on the morning after every other long night in its long history. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Whistler, the summer of 1994, was the longest summer Harry had spent at the foundry since the first one. He had come back from Hogsmeade in late June with the silver short sword cleaned and oiled and the harness due for replacement at the right shoulder because the boy had grown another 1.5 inches across the chest. Whistler measured him on the second day. Whistler made the new harness in 8 days. The new harness incorporated a small leather sheath at the small of the back for the silver dagger. Quirrell, in the same 8 days, ran a long round of bloodwork on Harry under the workshop lamp. She drew samples at 6-hour intervals over 2 nights. She looked at the results on the third morning with the kind of long, quiet look she had when results had told her a thing she had been waiting on. Stable, she said. Stable how? He's metabolizing the venom at a rate that, if it holds, will give him sun tolerance for life by the time he's 20. The conversion is, for practical purposes, complete. He has the strength, he has the speed, he has the healing. He does not, by my reading, have the hunger any longer. He has not needed the EDTA since March. You're sure? I am sure for the past 3 months. I am not sure for the rest of his life. He will continue on the dose at the maintenance level. We are not stopping the serum. But for the practical question of, is the boy now a daywalker on his own merits, the answer is yes. She and Eric looked at each other over the workbench. Eric, for the count of a breath, did the thing he very rarely did, which was let the lines of his face soften. Then he gathered the lines back where they belonged. Good, he said. Good. Whistler, from his stool, did not look up from the harness in his hands. Whistler had heard the answer before Quirrell had given it, because Whistler had been with the boy since he was 8 and Whistler had read the trajectory in his hands. He's going to outlive us, Whistler said. That was always the plan, Eric said. That was always the plan. The trouble that summer came from the east. The Berlin elders, who had been content for 10 years to let the London bank operate as a regional vendor without sending observers, had begun, in the wake of the Hogsmeade strike, to ask questions. Whistler tracked the asking through Yvette, his Hamburg contact, and Yvette by the second week of July sent word that an elder's courier had been seen on the same flight as an enforcer named Mercury. And Mercury, having flown to JFK, had been seen the next morning hiring a private driver who had been logged into a database Whistler had had access to since the Reagan administration. The driver had been hired on a 4-day contract to drive west. Whistler told Eric on a Wednesday in the second week of August. They sat in the workshop at the long oak table with the layout of the foundry between them on a wide blueprint Whistler had made himself in 1989. They are coming here. They are coming here. How many? Mercury and an entourage. He travels with 6, counting drivers and runners, perhaps 10. We have heat from the Hogsmeade book. They have heard. They are coming to the source. They will not come in subtle. Number they will come in heavy. The elders are not in the habit of subtle. They are in the habit of demonstration. When? 2 nights, Friday. All right. Eric. Yes. The boy goes to a safe house. Yes, tomorrow. Harry was not in the event willing to go. He listened to the briefing at the kitchen table with his elbows on the wood and his eyes on Eric. He listened until Eric had finished. He did not interrupt. When Eric was done, he said, excuse me. No, sir, I am not leaving. Son, you taught me how to fight. You did not teach me how to be sent away. I am not sending you away because you can't fight. I am sending you away because if they come in heavy and they hit this foundry, they will hit it with 30 enforcers and not 10, and the foundry will not survive the hit, and I do not want you in the foundry when it goes. Then I want you out of the foundry with me. They have to be met. If we run from this fight, they follow us, and they follow us as far as we go, and we do not get to choose the next ground. Then choose this ground with 3 of us on it. Quirrell will be here. 3 of us, sir. You Quirrell me? A long silence. Whistler at the end of the table did not look up. Quirrell beside Eric said soft, Eric, he's 13, he took Frost's head off 4 months ago. I know. Eric, I know. He stays. A long quiet. He stays, Eric said. They turned the foundry by Friday into the place Whistler had spent 4 years engineering it to be. Whistler walked the building from the riverside basement to the roof, throwing the switches that put it into the configuration he had drawn out in 1989 and had not yet had to use. The ground floor became a maze of stacked steel shutters and fixed UV emitters at the corners. The second floor became a kill box, with retracting partitions that turned the workshop into a long firing alley with no cover. The third floor became the fallback, the small bottleneck stairwell at the back of the gym set up as a choke point covered by 3 angles. The fourth floor was Quirrell's. The fourth floor had the laboratory and the safe in Quirrell, who had not slept the night before because Quirrell had been writing 2 long encrypted letters, one to her own brother in Tehran and one to a contact at the Centers for Disease Control, neither of whom would receive their letter unless she did not survive the next 24 hours. By 6 on Friday evening, the foundry was quiet. The traffic on the river road had thinned. Whistler sat on the second-floor landing with the shotgun across his knees and the loader at his elbow. Eric stood at the front window of the first-floor lobby with the silver short sword on his hip and the silence pistol on the other, and behind him in the dark Quirrell had her own auto shotgun and the EDTA flask and a field kit with morphine and adrenaline and 4 bags of universal donor blood drawn from her own freezer. Harry was on the second floor with Whistler. He had asked to be there. Eric had said no. The second floor was the kill box. The second floor was the place where the fire would be heaviest. Whistler had said, "Let the boy stand with me." Whistler had said, "He has been with me at this workbench for 6 years. He will not be on this landing without me. He will be where I am and I will be where the shotgun is." Eric had not argued the second time. Harry sat on the landing in a crouch with the wand in the left and the silver dagger in the right and the sword in the harness at the shoulder ready for the draw. He had taken the EDTA at 5:30. He did not need it any longer for the hunger, but Quirrell had said keep on the dose tonight because the dose stabilizes you in the adrenaline and you will not want to be off it in a firefight. He had taken the dose. He was steady. Whistler, beside him, was eating a hard-boiled egg. "You eat at a time like this," Harry said. "You eat at every time like this. The fight goes long. The fight goes longer than you think it will go. The fight goes longer than the body can run on the breakfast you had. Eat, son, have an egg." Harry had an egg. The first sound came at 7 minutes past 8. It was the sound of a delivery truck pulling up at the loading bay on the river side. Whistler had been waiting for it. The loading bay had been mined being a generous word for the half-pound charge of plastic Whistler had set into the door frame 6 months ago against exactly this circumstance, and Whistler had wired the charge to a button on his belt, and he had wired the button to himself with a length of det cord short enough that he could not lose it. He did not press the button at the truck. He waited for the men to get out of the truck. He counted them, 4. He counted them as they came up to the loading bay door, which was locked, and he counted them as they stood on the loading bay platform, which Whistler had reinforced 6 months ago with a hollow steel plate over an air gap, and he counted them as one of them lifted a crowbar to the door, and at that instant Whistler pressed the button. The plate, which had been a hollow steel plate over an air gap, ceased to be hollow. The plate became a flat directed punch upward and outward at the 4 men on it. The 4 men did not have time to register anything. They went up. They went up by about 30 feet in 4 directions in pieces, and they came down on the riverside concrete in the same pieces, and the concrete absorbed them. The truck behind them, which had a 5th man at the wheel, took off into the road and was clear of the riverside in 3 seconds. "That's 1 truck," Whistler said. "There will be more. There will be more." There were more. 2 more trucks came up the river road. They came up at low speed in the next 10 minutes. They were Mercury's main column. Whistler watched them through the binoculars from the second-floor window. He counted 6 in the first and 6 in the second. They parked at distance. They did not come straight in. They came in around, taking the back, taking the alley, taking the roof of the warehouse next door, working as a column that had done this work before in other cities for other targets and had not lost. The first contact at the foundry was a flicker on the roof. Eric, on the ground floor, did not see the flicker. Eric did not need to. Eric had a wire on the roof that ran to a pin behind his ear, and the wire reported the flicker as a soft tone, and the tone told Eric exactly where the flicker had been. He left the lobby. He went up the back stairs at a run. He met the roof team at the 3rd-floor landing. He killed them at the 3rd-floor landing. He came down again with the silver of the sword having been wiped on the seam of his coat and the silenced pistol having needed a new magazine. He did not say anything to Whistler on the 2nd floor as he passed through. He went on down. He took the ground floor again. The breach came at the front of the building at 8:23. Mercury did not come in with the breach. Mercury, in the way of his rank, came in second. The breach was 3 of his lieutenants and 4 of his enforcers, and they came through the front shutters with a magnetic ram that had been built in a Detroit machine shop the previous month for the precise purpose. They did not get past the lobby. Eric was in the lobby. The lobby had been set up the night before to accommodate the way Eric fought when he had a corner to use. He used the corner. 7 men came in. 6 men did not get out of the lobby. The seventh got out of the lobby because the seventh was Mercury, and Mercury, when the count of his men in the lobby fell below 3, opted to withdraw and call in the second column. The second column hit the second floor. That is where it went wrong. Mercury had read Whistler's schematics. Mercury had not read the schematics from Whistler's plans, which had not left the building. Mercury had read them from a man named Hoffman, who had sold to the elders a copy of the foundry's electrical layout that Hoffman had stolen from Whistler in 1991, in the course of a transaction Whistler had thought was about a freezer. Mercury had used the schematics to plan a breach at the river side of the second floor through a window that, on the schematics, had been blanked out. The window was no longer blanked out on the day. Whistler had taken the blank off in 1992 for ventilation. He had not put the blank back. He had filed the omission in his head and had meant to address it. He had not addressed it. The riverside window of the second floor went in. 6 enforcers came through the window in 2 seconds. Whistler was on the landing across the room with the shotgun. Whistler killed 3 of the 6 with the shotgun in 2 seconds. The 4th he killed with the silver bayonet on the end of the auto shotgun, which he had built into the barrel collar for exactly this purpose, in the next half second. The 5th was on him. The 5th bit him. Whistler did not shout. Whistler did the only thing a man bitten in a firefight could do, which was put the muzzle of the shotgun under the chin of the man biting him and pull the trigger. The 5th went off Whistler in the recoil. Whistler stepped back. He stepped back exactly once. He took the bayonet across the throat of the 6th, who had come in late, and the 6th went down in front of him. Harry came round the landing with the wand and the dagger. Whistler was holding the side of his neck. Whistler, boy, Whistler number, get me into the back room. Get me into the back room and call your father. Call him now. Get him up here. Harry got him into the back room. Harry called Eric on the wire. Eric came up the back stair at a run. Quirrell came down from the 4th floor with her field kit. Whistler sat on the cot in the back room with his back against the wall and his right hand on his neck. The blood on the hand was the color of when a man's blood was on the first 6 seconds still his own. By the time Quirrell had got the kit open, the color had begun to do the thing. She looked at the wound. She did not say anything. Eric, kneeling at the cot, did not say anything. Whistler on the cot did the speaking. Quirrell, yes, you have how long? 40 minutes maybe? Faster than that. Maybe 20. You and me 20 minutes. We are going to talk for 10 of them. The other 10 you give me back. Eric, you are going to listen and you are not going to argue. The boy is here. The boy stays. Harry, come here. Harry came. He knelt beside the cot. Whistler took his hand with the hand that was not on his neck. The hand was already cold. Son, Whistler, listen to me. I have known you 6 years. You came into my workshop a thin, starved thing of 8, and you became in my workshop the best apprentice I have had in my life. You know this. You also know that I am not going to last the hour. I am bitten and the bite is on the carotid, and Quirrell's serum will not run that fast against a carotid bite. So the next 10 minutes are the 10 minutes I have. Hear me out. Yes. There is a drawer in the workshop, 3rd bench, left side, false bottom. In the false bottom is a folder. The folder is the manifest of every weapon I have built in my life, with the diagrams, with the metallurgy notes, with the sourcing. The folder is yours. You will continue the line. You will build for the next generation what I built for yours. Yes. Yes. There is a stake in the case under the workbench. Hawthorne, carved in 1968 by a man in Lyon. The stake has my name on the underside. The stake is for you. Carry it. Do not lose it. The Hawthorne is older than I am. Yes. Eric. Yes, you have raised him well. I want to say this for the record because I do not know if I have said it. You have raised him well. You have given him the things I was afraid you would not be able to give him. You have given him an honest hand. You have given him patience. You have given him the kind of love that is, in our work, the only kind that survives the work. I am proud of you, my friend. I have been proud of you since the night you stood in my workshop the first time. I have not always said it. Eric did not say anything. Eric was holding Whistler's other hand. Eric's face did not move. Eric's eye did. Quirrell. Yes, the biology of the boy is yours. Keep him stable. He will outlast both of us. Keep him on the maintenance dose until he is 25. He will not need it after, but until... Yes. Now. Whistler reached under his pillow with the hand that was not on his neck. He brought out the snub-nosed revolver he had carried since 1962. He set it on his thigh. He looked at Eric. Eric. Yes, you take it, and you do it. You do not let me do it because the doing it is a thing the body remembers, and I do not want my last act in this life to be on myself. Yes, you do it with the silver round. There is one in the chamber under the hammer. The first round is the silver. Do it on the count of 3. Yes, look at me, my friend. Eric looked at him. Some bastards still need a wake-up call, Whistler said, soft. Yes. I never knew you to leave one waiting. Number 3. The shot was clean. The room afterwards was a long silence in which the only sound was Harry's breath through his nose, which had stopped being even, and the small click of Quirrell folding the cap back over the unused syringe in the field kit. Eric, on his knees beside the cot, set the revolver on the floor with the muzzle pointing away from the body. He stood. He did not look at the body, he looked at Quirrell. "The roof," he said. "The roof." They took Whistler up to the roof at moonrise. The Detroit night was clear. The river under them was a black ribbon with the lights of Windsor on the far side. The squad had cleared the building in the last 40 minutes. The remaining 4 of Mercury's men had been put down in the first floor by Eric on the way back, and Mercury himself had been put down in the alley by the squad's marksman from the warehouse next door. The building belonged to them again. The fire on the roof did not. The fire was for Whistler. They built the pyre on the roof out of the workshop's spare timber. Whistler had wanted no priest. Whistler had wanted no ceremony. He had asked Eric in 1990 for one thing only: a clean burn under open sky, and the eulogy spoken in his own kitchen by people who had known him as he was. The eulogy in the kitchen had not happened yet. The clean burn under the open sky was this one. Eric lit the pyre. He did not say anything as the pyre took. Quirrell, beside him, was crying without making any sound at all, the way Quirrell cried, with the tears running and the face holding still. Harry, on Eric's other side, did not cry either, because Whistler had told him 4 years ago in the workshop on a long evening that he had earned the right to cry once in his life, and that he should save the once for a thing that was his to lose. And Harry had not yet decided whether this was a thing that was his to lose or whether it was a thing that had been given to him to keep. He stood and watched the fire and held the hawthorn stake in his right hand at his side. The fire was clean. It took an hour. When it was over, Eric scattered the ashes off the edge of the roof onto the river, and the river took them, and the river carried them down and into the channel and out to the lakes and out eventually to the sea. Harry, when the ashes had gone, sat on the edge of the roof with his legs over and his hands flat on the parapet. Eric came over after a while and sat beside him. The two of them sat in the dark for a long time without speaking. The lights of Windsor across the water did not change. The wind did not change. Once far off, a freight train sounded its horn on a bridge over the Rouge. "Sir? Yes, I do not want to go back to the school. I know, I want to stay. I know, I want to stay and learn what he was going to teach me. Yes, but you are going to make me go back to the school." "Yes, why?" "Because he would have made you go back, because the work he gave you is not finished. Because the network you went to build is the network that, when you come back to it for the long career, is going to keep you alive. Because the reason he died, son, is because what he was building was a thing that took more than one lifetime to build, and you are the next lifetime." "Yes. Take the hawthorn, sleep in the room. Tomorrow we eat breakfast at the kitchen table and we say the things we did not say in front of him because he did not want us to. Then in 2 weeks you go back to school." "Yes." Eric put one arm around the boy's shoulders. He left it there a long time. Harry, after a while, leaned his head against the side of the man's coat. Neither of them spoke. The Detroit night on either side of them went on being a Detroit night. Harry returned to Hogwarts at the start of his 4th year with the hawthorn stake at the small of his back, the silver dagger sheathed inside the harness, the silver short sword on his shoulder, and the new wand grip that Whistler had begun to design for him in May and had not finished. He had finished it himself on the morning of the 3rd of September on the workshop bench in the foundry, and Quirrell, at his elbow, had not corrected the one small wobble in the line because the wobble was his and was the way it would be. The school did not know what had happened in Detroit. McGonagall, who suspected, asked him on the second night in her office if everything was well with his guardians. He told her, "No, ma'am, it isn't," and he told her the rest in 5 sentences, and McGonagall sat back in her chair and pressed her fingers against her closed eyes for a moment. "I am sorry, Mr. Potter. Thank you, ma'am. If there is any leave you need." "There is no leave I need, ma'am. I would like to be in class." "Then you shall be." He was. The autumn went the way autumns went. Hermione, who had heard from him the second night of the term in the library at the back table with no one near them, did not stop touching his elbow for a week. And Harry, who had not been touched on the elbow by a girl his own age before, did not move his elbow away. Ron, who had not heard until October because Harry had not yet been able to tell him, took the news in the way Ron took news, which was to be quiet about it for half a day, and then to spend the next month bringing Harry sandwiches at intervals at the library table without being asked. The Triwizard came up at Halloween the way it had been planned, and Harry's name came up out of the goblet at 9:30 that night. And Dumbledore, with the goblet smoldering on the steps, looked at him across the hall in a way that said, "I know, son," and Harry, who had not put his name in the goblet and had not asked anyone to put his name in the goblet, walked up the steps with his face very calm because Eric had taught him in 1989. That when something went very wrong, you walked toward it at a steady pace, because the pace itself was a kind of speech. The tournament went the way the tournament went. He took the dragon in the first task with a wand and a clean idea and his footwork. He took the lake in the second task on a half-liter of gillyweed and the recognition, halfway down, that Ron was the hostage and the hostage would be released to the surface regardless, and that he had time to bring up the additional 3. He brought up the additional 3. He brought up Fleur's sister himself because the merpeople were not going to release her, and he brought her up under his arm with the second wand hand on a bubblehead charm Hermione had taught him in October. The maze on the night of the 24th of June was, as far as Harry was concerned at the start of the night, the third task. He went in third because his score was tied for first. Cedric went in beside him because they were tied. Krum was a minute behind. Fleur was 4 minutes behind. He met Cedric at the central junction. They had a brief discussion about who would take the cup. They had decided in advance, the two of them in the corridor outside the prefect's bathroom the week before, that they would take it together. They walked toward the cup side by side. Cedric reached for it first. Harry felt the pull at his scar 1/2 second before Cedric's hand touched the metal. He moved. He took Cedric off his feet at the waist with his left shoulder hard, in a pivot Eric had drilled him on 100 times against a man going for a draw. Cedric went sideways. Cedric was a full head taller than Harry, but Harry was 3 years of Eric's drilling, and Eric's drilling beat height. Cedric came off the line. His outstretched hand missed the cup by an inch. Harry, at the moment of the shove, drew the silver short sword from the harness. The cup, untouched by either of their hands, went on glowing. The cup had been set up not to require a touch. The cup was a portkey on a proximity charm. The proximity charm engaged. The pull came. Harry caught Cedric by the collar of his robe and shoved him hard, with a wand hand spell on the small of Cedric's back in the direction of the maze entrance. The spell was Hermione's, a banishing variant. Cedric went under the lower hedge in a roll and out of the proximity radius of the cup. The radius pulled Harry. The radius did not pull Cedric. Harry, in the half-second before the portkey took him, drew a small folded piece of parchment from his sleeve. The parchment had been folded that morning. The parchment had been folded by him. He let the parchment fall to the grass at the foot of the cup. The parchment had 2 words on it in his own hand. The 2 words were, "Come now." The portkey took him. The parchment lay on the grass at the foot of the empty plinth for 38 seconds before anyone came to pick it up. The first person to reach the plinth was Cedric Diggory, who had got back up out of the hedge with a long scrape down the side of his cheek and a heart that had not yet settled. He had run for the plinth on the assumption that he would find Harry. He had not found Harry. He had found grass and a folded paper. He had picked up the paper. He had read the 2 words. He had stared at the 2 words for a count of 3. Then Cedric Diggory had done the thing that, by his father's account in many later interviews, had defined him as a man. He had not panicked. He had folded the parchment shut. He had turned. He had run for the maze entrance. He had reached the maze entrance and shoved through the hedge at the marshal's gate. He had reached Madame Hooch first and Bagman behind her and Crouch behind Bagman and Dumbledore behind Crouch. He had handed the parchment to Dumbledore. He had said in a voice that did not shake, "It was a portkey. He shoved me clear. He left this." Dumbledore had read the 2 words. Dumbledore, who in 9 decades of public life had developed the public face of a man who never permitted his own surprise, had permitted his own surprise for exactly the count of 1 second on that face. He had folded the parchment. He had said, "Mr. Diggory, thank you, you are dismissed to the hospital wing." He had walked into his office with the parchment in his hand. He had reached the fireplace. He had thrown flue powder into the grate. He had said, in the voice he had used 4 times in 9 decades for the calling of names that meant a thing was about to happen, "Severus." In a townhouse on Spinner's End in Cokeworth, Severus Snape had answered the flue with his coat already on. He had not gone to bed. He had been waiting. Dumbledore had said 1 sentence. Snape had said 1 sentence. The fireplace had gone dark and Snape had apparated to a row of Muggle motorway services where a black Bronco had been parked for the last 6 hours with 3 people in it waiting on a tracker signal. The tracker signal had lit at the moment of the portkey. The Bronco had been moving for 30 seconds by the time Snape apparated into the back seat. Corinne, in the passenger seat with the map on her knee, did not turn around at the crack of his arrival. "Hello, Severus, Doctor, coordinates. Little Hangleton, the old Riddle house. There is a churchyard behind it. He will be in the churchyard." "How long?" 16 minutes at this speed. Drive, Eric drove. By the time the convoy reached the lane outside the Riddle churchyard at 23 minutes past 9, Cedric Diggory was in the hospital wing with his cheek being seen to by Madame Pomfrey and was answering the questions of his father, who had been brought in by Bagman. Cedric, between answers, had asked exactly the same question twice. Where is he? Where has he gone? His father, who did not have an answer, did not give one. Madame Pomfrey, who also did not have an answer, applied a paste of dittany to the scrape on the cheek and said the scar would not show in a week. Hermione, who had been in the stands when the maze had emptied of one champion and not the other, was at the doors of the hospital wing within 10 minutes. Ron was beside her. They had not spoken on the run-up from the pitch. They had not needed to. Hermione had had the wand in her hand the entire way. She, of all the people in the school that night, was the one who knew exactly what the parchment had meant. She found McGonagall in the corridor outside. She said, "Professor, he is going to need a re-entry. He is going to come back through the portkey. He is going to come back the moment the work on the other side is done. He cannot come back through the gates. The gates will be watched. He needs an alternate." McGonagall looked at her a long second. "Miss Granger, ma'am, you have, I believe, thought about this. For the last 11 months, ma'am. Then come with me." They went to Dumbledore's office. Dumbledore was not there. Dumbledore was in Hogsmeade at the gate of the Three Broomsticks with the bent gates of the village behind him and a long, quiet expression on his face that suggested he had received the same telegram McGonagall had received the moment before. McGonagall and Hermione in his office set up the alternate re-entry at the 7th floor landing of the astronomy tower, where the wards were thin and where, if the boy did come back through the portkey, he would land softly on a square of mat Hermione had conjured at the foot of the rail. They sat by it. They waited. They did not have to wait long. The boy did not come back through the portkey. The boy came back 3 days later, in the back of a black Bronco that pulled up to the gates of Hogwarts at a polite hour on a Sunday morning, with a man at the wheel who Hermione recognized from a single brief description in a letter the boy had once written her in November of his second year. The man did not get out of the Bronco. The boy did. He walked up the drive with the hawthorn stake at the small of his back and the silver short sword on his shoulder and the wand in the spring sheath on his right forearm. He walked up the drive the way he had walked toward the portkey, with the steady pace Eric had taught him to use when a thing had gone very badly, and the pace itself was the speech. But all of that was 3 days away. In the present second, on the grass of the riddled churchyard, the portkey had just put him down. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The graveyard. The portkey put him down on the wet grass of a country churchyard he did not know. The grass was long. The grass smelled of damp earth and of the way grass smelled when it had not been cut in a long time and had been kept in the shade of yew trees. Above him, when his vision returned, there was a sky of low cloud the color of slate, and through a gap in the cloud the first of the evening stars was showing. He had landed on his shoulder. He had landed correctly because Eric in 1990 had drilled him in the correct way to land when arriving under unknown conditions, which was on the off shoulder with the head tucked and the strong hand free. The silver short sword was still in his right hand. The wand was in the left. He was in a graveyard. He took 2 seconds to count. He counted the way Eric had taught him to count, which was without moving his head. He counted in his peripheral vision. He counted 6 stones to the south of him, 11 to the north, 3 vertical figures behind him at the foot of a yew, 1 large cauldron at the center of a clearing 15 feet ahead of him. The cauldron was steaming. The cauldron was the dull copper color of a cauldron that had been used for the purpose for which this one had been brought out, and the steam was not the color of ordinary steam. The steam was a pale violet that, if he had not known otherwise, he would have called familiar. He kept his head down. He had landed almost behind a tall headstone in the second row. He moved on his belly half a meter to the left so the headstone was between him and the cauldron. He read the name on the headstone without raising his head. Tom Riddle. The name was not the father's. The name was the grandfather's. The dates on the stone said 1880 to 1943. He had read about the Riddles in a Daily Prophet archive Hermione had pulled in October. He knew where he was. He took his hand off the wand a moment and reached into his sleeve and felt the small steel disc Quirrell had stitched there in May. The disc was a tracker. The tracker had been quiescent until the portkey. The tracker by now was lit. Quirrell in Liverpool tonight would have the tracker on the screen in the back of the second van. The squad in the second van would be running the coordinates. Eric in the front of the lead van would have the route on the map on his knee. They would be coming. He had to buy them time. The 3 vertical figures behind him at the foot of the yew were a man with no nose holding a baby-shaped bundle, a small fat man with a silver hand, and a tall figure he could not see clearly. The man with no nose, after the second he had finished giving his instructions to the small fat man, walked across the clearing and dropped the bundle into the cauldron. The bundle hit the surface. The cauldron took it. The small fat man, who Harry recognized with a small clean nausea as Pettigrew, lifted a knife and began the recitation. Bone of the father unknowingly given, you will renew your son. A long pale stick rose out of the earth at the foot of the headstone Harry was behind. The stick was a fragment of the bone of Tom Riddle Sr. The stick floated past Harry's shoulder 2 inches above the grass and dropped into the cauldron. The cauldron took it. The cauldron began to hiss. Flesh of the servant willingly given, you will revive your master. Pettigrew set the knife to his own forearm at the wrist. He paused half a second, he cut. Hand came off cleanly. The hand fell into the cauldron. The cauldron took it. Pettigrew, on his knees in the grass with the cut stump pressed against his coat, made a small noise that was not a word and was not a scream and was, for the moment, the only sound in the clearing. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe. Pettigrew came toward Harry. Pettigrew came toward Harry the way a man comes toward a thing he has been told he must do regardless of his terror. Harry had time then. Harry had 2 seconds. He had used a similar 2 seconds before, he used them now. He dropped the silver short sword in the grass at his side, point away from himself, in a position he could grab again at a quarter second's notice. He took the silver dagger out of the harness under his left arm. He kept the wand in his left hand. He held both hands open and slack at his sides. He let Pettigrew come. Pettigrew reached him. Pettigrew took his wrist with the small fat hand that remained, the one that had not just been cut off, and Pettigrew put the knife to the inside of his elbow. Harry let him. Pettigrew drew the blood. Pettigrew drew it into a small glass phial. Pettigrew turned with the phial to take it back to the cauldron. In the half-second Pettigrew's back was to Harry. Harry put the silver dagger through Pettigrew's left calf at the line of the Achilles. From the inside, the cut Eric had shown him on the upturned blade. The cut was the cut for crippling a man without killing him. Pettigrew went down. The phial flew out of Pettigrew's hand on the going down. The phial cleared the cauldron by 1.5 feet. The phial hit a headstone 20 feet on and broke. The blood spilled onto the wet stone. The cauldron, having received bone and flesh and now nothing, hissed. The hissing was wrong. The violet steam over the cauldron faltered. The cauldron, in the way of cauldrons, did not understand half a recipe. The wraith inside it screamed. The scream came up out of the cauldron in the way the scream had come up out of the back of Quirrell's head in 1992, a thin gray thing, and the thing rose and tried to gather and could not gather because the third ingredient had not gone in. The thing rose to a height of about 8 feet above the cauldron and hung there, smoking, looking for a body, and the body it had been promised lay on the grass at the foot of the yew with the eyes of a child who had not been finished and never would be. Behind Harry, in the lane that ran past the south gate of the graveyard, a bronco hit the gates at 50 miles an hour. The bronco went through the gates as though the gates had not been there. The iron bent, the brick gave. The bronco came skidding to a stop on the long grass with its front bumper 20 feet inside the graveyard, and the doors opened. Quirrell came out of the passenger door with the auto shotgun raised. Eric came out of the driver's door with the silver-edged sword in his hand and the silenced pistol on his hip. The 4 members of the squad came out of the second van behind, which had stopped at the bent gates, and they came in at a low run with UV grenades primed at the belt and the silver bayonet shotguns up. In the same second, from the dark of the yew shadow behind the cauldron, the Death Eaters apparated. They apparated in a ring around the cauldron, 12 of them robed and masked. They had been told to come on the resurrection signal. The resurrection had not signaled. The Death Eaters did not understand they had been summoned for an event that had failed. They saw the wraith above the cauldron. They saw a child standing 15 feet from the cauldron with a wand. They saw on the other side of the iron gates the broken nose of a black bronco and an armed crew coming through the grass. The first UV grenade went up in the air over the center of the ring. The grenade was Whistler's. Whistler had designed it in 1991 to a tolerance that did not exist in any catalog. It opened, in the air at 15 feet, into a single flat sheet of ultraviolet at the wavelength that ran a vampire's particular hemoglobin into the metal-burning reaction Quirrell had documented in her papers in 1989. The sheet of light covered the clearing for the precise second, and a third the grenade lasted. The masks of the Death Eaters did not protect them. The robes of the Death Eaters did not protect them. 4 of the 12 went under. 5 of the 12 registered they were being attacked by something that the masks were not equipped to deflect, and they apparated out within the second the grenade was open. They apparated, in the way Death Eaters who survived the first second of an unfamiliar attack apparated, to wherever was easiest, which was the wards of the house outside the graveyard. The wards were not active. The 5 reappeared inside the wards of the house and registered the wards were not active, and were, within the next 2 seconds, hit at the back of the head by the second member of the squad, who had been stationed at the front door of the house with a silver bayonet shotgun in expectation of this exact development. The 5 went down. The 5 did not get up. 3 of the 12 were still in the clearing. Eric had crossed the wet grass to the cauldron. The wraith above the cauldron, which had been gathering, did not have time to finish the gather. The wraith saw on the man with the silver-edged sword crossing the grass toward it the face it had not seen in 11 years and had been waiting to see again. The wraith opened the mouth it did not yet have. "Harry Potter," the wraith said, Eric took the silver-edged sword across the column of smoke at the angle Eric had taken the silver-edged sword across the throat of the gray-haired man in Knockturn Alley in 1988. The smoke parted. The smoke did not finish the sentence. Eric, with the same motion, drove the point of the silver-edged sword through the heart of the cauldron itself. The copper of the cauldron, 3 inches thick, did not stop the silver. The silver went through. The cauldron split. The wraith fell. The wraith fell because the wraith had been depending for the half-second of its gather on the chamber the cauldron was holding open beneath it. The chamber, when the cauldron split, ceased to be a chamber. The wraith dropped into the dirt at the center of the clearing and tried on the dirt to gather again. The dirt did not accept it. The dirt rejected it the way the floor of the chamber in Hogwarts had rejected the chicken in 1992. The wraith, in the second it had on the dirt, looked up at the boy with the wand. Harry walked toward it. He had picked the silver short sword out of the grass at the side of the headstone. He had it in his right hand. He had the wand in his left. He stood over the place where the wraith was trying to gather, and he looked at the wraith. The wraith looked back at him. The wraith looked at him with the eye slits it had borrowed from itself, and the wraith said, very small, very thin, in a voice that did not have the breath to carry it past Harry's ear, "Harry. We are the same kind of." The third UV grenade went up at the periphery of the clearing, fired by the squad's second man, and the wash of the grenade put down the 3 Death Eaters who had still been in the clearing. The 3 went under in the wash. The clearing, for the first time in the long minute of the fight, was empty of any Death Eater on his feet. Eric came up beside Harry. He did not stand close. He stood at the boy's right shoulder. "Son, sir, finish it." Harry put the wand back into the inside pocket of his robe. He took the silver short sword in 2 hands. He set the point of the blade at the center of the smoke on the dirt. The smoke tried again to gather. He let it try. He let it raise one slim gray filament of itself toward the air, the filament being what it had left of the mouth it had been about to use to give the speech it had been writing in the dark of its own waiting for 13 years. He drove the silver short sword through the center of the smoke and into the earth beneath. The smoke did not, on this go, scream. The smoke, on this go, simply ceased. There was a small flat moment of quiet on the grass. Then Eric drew the silenced pistol from his hip. He drew it because there was, in the way these things had to be done, a final round of work. The work was the work the squad was finishing on the periphery, the work of ensuring that nothing in the clearing or behind the gates would, in the next minutes or weeks, come up out of the dust to look for its master. The silenced pistol was loaded with the silver-cord rounds Whistler had milled in 1992. There were 6 rounds in the magazine. Eric had loaded 6 because 6 was what the magazine took, and because this evening he had not expected to need to count. He fired 6 rounds. 1 into the chest of each of the 7 Death Eaters lying in the wash of the UV grenade, except one who had been mostly taken by the silver bayonet of the squad's first man and who did not require a round. Eric did the work without raising his voice and without varying the timing of the shots. The shots were spaced a second apart. The silencer behaved. The wet grass absorbed the brass. When the 6th round was gone, Eric thumbed the slide back, looked at the empty magazine, and slid the pistol back into the holster. The clearing was silent. The U above the gravestones was silent. Quirrell, by the broken iron gates, lowered the auto shotgun. The squad members in their positions around the perimeter came in by degrees. No one spoke. The wind, which had been low all evening, came up an inch and moved the long grass against the stones, and that was the only sound. After a while, Quirrell came up across the grass to where Harry stood with the silver short sword still in the dirt where he had set it. She did not put her hand on him. She stood beside him. "You all right?" "Yes, you're sure?" "Yes, I'm all right. All right." She set down the auto shotgun. She bent. She pulled the silver short sword out of the dirt. She wiped it on the wet grass. She handed it back to him. He sheathed it under the harness. The harness fit. The new fittings Whistler had cut in May held the weight of it cleanly. Quirrell stayed there a long second. Then she walked over to the cauldron where Eric was kneeling on the dirt with the bundle of cloth that had held the baby-shaped thing now spread out flat on the grass, and she crouched beside him and she put her hand on his shoulder and Eric let her. The squad cleaned the graveyard. They cleaned it the way the squad cleaned a site. Bagged the dust, photographed the headstones, marked the broken gate with a tarp, ran a thermite charge through the cauldron's remains so that no piece of the cauldron larger than a coin would survive. The dust they bagged because Quirrell would want to test it back at the lab. Nothing in the dust would help any of their enemies. But the dust would tell Quirrell things about the way the Wraith had failed to gather and would, by morning, be the basis of 3 notes in her field journal that would become, in turn, the basis of the procedure they would use in the small number of other ritual sites they were going to encounter in the coming years. Pettigrew, on the grass with the cut tendon, was still alive. He was bleeding from the stump where the hand had been, and was bleeding from the back of the calf where the dagger had gone in. He was sobbing without making any sound. Eric stood over him a long moment. Then Eric called Quirrell across. "Patch him up." Eric, he has the testimony, he has the names, he is the man who put the wand in Voldemort's hand the night the Potters died. He has been alive on this earth for 13 years passing as a rat. He is going to live the next 40 as a man in a cell at the Ministry's pleasure. Patch him up. Quirrell patched him up. She did it efficiently and without comment. The stump she packed with a clotting agent and a pressure bandage. The calf she sutured with 3 quick stitches from the field kit. Pettigrew did not stop sobbing. At 20 past midnight the Bronco and the 2 vans pulled out of the little Hangleton Lane in convoy. The bent iron gates of the Riddle churchyard were tarped behind them. The clearing was empty, the cauldron was slag, the dust was bagged. Pettigrew was in the back of the second van with his hands and his ankles zipped to a stanchion and a cloth in his mouth so the sobbing did not, on the long drive south, become a nuisance. Harry sat in the front of the Bronco between Eric, who drove, and Quirrell, who navigated. He had not let go of the wand for the first 20 minutes of the drive. He let go of it at the M1 junction when Quirrell, looking sideways at him, said, "Harry." "Yes." "You can put it away." Yes, he put it away. They did not speak for a long stretch of the M1. The motorway at this hour was thin. The lorries in the slow lane went past at a polite distance. The lights on the verge ran by in the small, steady rhythm they had been running by in for the previous hour. At Watford Gap, Eric pulled the Bronco off at the services. He did not say why. He parked at the far end of the car park away from the lights. He turned off the engine. He sat with both hands on the wheel for a long minute, then he turned in his seat. "Son, sir, you did well tonight." "Yes, sir, not the kill was a kill. Anyone who has been trained can do a kill on a thing already half down. The thing I am saying you did well was the parchment. You wrote it before you went in. You knew what was waiting. You wrote it and you folded it and you put it where it would fall the right way. You bought yourself the minutes I needed. You bought yourself the minutes the squad needed. You bought Quirrell the radius she needed for the tracker. You did all of that before they finished telling you the rules of the third task." "Yes, sir." "That is the work, son, not the kill. The kill is the end of the work. The work is the preparation. You did the work." "Yes, sir." A long quiet. Eric reached over and put one gloved hand on the back of Harry's head and he left it there a moment. He took it off. He turned back to the wheel. He started the engine. "All right," he said. "Let's go home." The home he meant was not Detroit. The home he meant was a cottage Whistler had bought in 1991 in a village on the South Devon coast that had no telephone and that had been kept stocked, on a small standing order for exactly the year in which a long fight ended and a quiet stretch began. They had not used the cottage. Whistler had not lived to use it. They used it now. They were there by dawn. The cottage was at the head of a long lane that ran down to a beach the color of pale stone. The cottage had thick walls and small windows and a kitchen with a wood stove and a sitting room with 2 chairs and a writing desk. Quirrell lit the stove. Eric carried the kit and the kit bags in from the Bronco. The squad in the second van parked at the village pub 3 doors up and took rooms. Pettigrew, in the second van, went on to Orers, who had been called to the Cliveden waypoint at 1 in the morning by Dumbledore, who had received Quirrell's coded telegram an hour before that. Pettigrew was, by breakfast in Devon, in a ministry cell. The names he had been carrying for 13 years were already going down on parchment by the time the Devon stove was warm. Harry sat on the floor of the cottage sitting room with his back against the chair and his hands open on his knees. Quirrell brought him tea. He drank it. He did not say anything for an hour. He did not need to say anything. The fire in the stove popped twice. Outside on the lane a gull went over. Eric eventually came in from the kitchen. He sat in the chair Harry was leaning against. He did not put his hand on the boy's head. He left it on his own knee. The 2 of them sat that way for a long time. "Sir." "Yes." "The wraith said Harry Potter." "It did." "That was as far as it got." "That was as far as it got. Whistler told me once that some bastards still need a wake-up call." "He did. I don't think they need one anymore." "No, son, I don't think they do either." At sunset on the 2nd day of June, Harry walked down to the beach by himself. He had asked for the hour. Quirrell in the doorway had said yes. Eric in the kitchen had said yes. He walked down the lane to the sand. He stood at the line where the tide had reached at noon and had begun to retreat from. He had not, in the 3 days since the graveyard, cried. He took the silver short sword off the harness. He set it on the sand at his feet. He took the hawthorn stake out of the small sheath at his back. He set the stake on the sand beside the sword. He took the wand out of his sleeve and set it beside the stake. He took the silver dagger out and set it beside the wand. He stood with his hands empty for the first time in 11 years. He looked at the sea. He cried then the once Whistler had told him in 1990 he was allowed to cry. He cried for Lily. He cried for James. He cried for Whistler, whose ashes had gone into a different sea, but every sea in the end was the same sea. He cried for the bundle on the grass that had not been finished and now never would be. He cried for the boy of 8 in the cupboard in Little Winging who had been carried out of it on the shoulder of a tall man with a silver sword and had not been put down since. He cried steadily without sound for as long as the tide took to retreat another 6 inches. When he was done, he picked up the 4 things from the sand. He sheathed the sword, the dagger, and the stake. He slid the wand back into the sleeve. He turned back to the cottage on the lane. Eric was on the doorstep. He had not gone down the lane. He had not crowded the boy on the sand. He had stood on the step the whole time and watched the back of the boy's coat in the dim. And he had let the boy do what the boy needed to do because he had been told once in a bronco between Knockturn and Dartford in 1988 that he was going to be a father, and he had spent 6 years being a father. And he had got in the last 6 months very good at the part of being a father that was the standing on a step and the not going down. Harry came up the lane. He came up the lane with his hands at his sides and his face wet and his eye on the doorway. He did not slow at the gate. He did not slow at the path. Eric on the step opened his arms a small fraction of the way they would open. Harry on the path did not stop until the arms had closed around him, and Eric, when the arms closed, set his chin against the top of the boy's head and held him there a long time without speaking. Quirrell in the kitchen doorway did not come out. The stove in the sitting room popped once. The gulls down the lane went over toward the harbor. Harry, against Eric's coat, did not say anything. Eric, with his hand at the back of the boy's head, did not say anything either. The Devon evening on either side of them went on being a Devon evening, and the long fight that had begun on a wet alley in London in the autumn of 1988 had, on this small step on the south coast of England, become a quiet stretch. The quiet stretch was the only thing either of them had wanted for a very long time. It was enough. On the Sunday morning, Harry walked up the drive of Hogwarts in his old school robes with the dust of 3 days at the Devon cottage still on the cuffs. The drive was empty. The lawns had been kept open by McGonagall, who had told the staff in the small hours of the previous Tuesday morning that no, the school would not be closed, and no, the students would not be sent home early, and yes, she expected Mr. Potter to return when he had finished what he had set out to do, and any member of staff who proposed otherwise would explain themselves at supper. There had been no further proposals. He met Hermione and Ron at the doors of the entrance hall. He did not say anything for a moment. They did not say anything for a moment. Hermione, after the moment, set her forehead against his shoulder. Ron, on the other side, set one hand on the back of his neck and left it there. Mate. Yeah, you're back. Yeah, don't do that again. They went inside. Dumbledore met him in the headmaster's office at 11. Dumbledore had been awake since 5. He had a tea tray on the desk and a small plate of biscuits Quirrell would have approved of, and he had beside the tray a leather folder Harry recognized. The folder was a copy of Frost's ledger. Eric had sent it up by owl on the second day. Dumbledore had been reading it since. Harry, sir, you will sit, please. He sat. Dumbledore did not begin with the ledger. He began instead with the parchment. You wrote this, he said, at 6 o'clock yesterday afternoon a fortnight ago, on the morning of the day of the third task. Yes, sir. You folded it, you put it in your sleeve, you carried it through the morning's classes, you carried it through luncheon, you carried it down to the maze. Yes, sir, you knew then what was coming. I had read the schedule, sir. The cup had been brought up from the vaults the night before. I had felt the pull at my scar 3 days before. I knew what was in the cup. I did not, until I crossed the maze, know whether it would be me. There were 4 of us in the maze. The pull on the scar said it was likely to be me. I prepared for the likely case. You did not tell me. No, sir. Why not? Because, sir, if I had told you, you would have closed the cup. If you had closed the cup, the ritual on the other side would have been postponed. We had been working, my guardian and I, for 14 years to get the ritual to a point where we could be at the table when it was attempted. We did not want it postponed. We wanted it concluded. Dumbledore was quiet a long second. I see. Yes, sir. You used yourself as the bait. Yes, sir. The bait was the only piece on the board the other side would respond to. The bait had to be presented in a manner that the other side believed was an accident. The bait, for it to be believed, could not be known to the headmaster of the school it walked out of, because the headmaster of the school is too close to the bait for the other side to credit it. The play required, sir, that you not know. And had it gone wrong? It did not, sir. Had it gone wrong, Harry, then it would have gone wrong, sir. I had been told what to do. I did it. Dumbledore looked at him over the half-moons. The look held a thing Harry had not seen in Dumbledore's face before. The look was not anger. The look was not pride. The look was the long, quiet assessment of a man who, having spent 50 years being the most competent person in any room he was in, had on this particular morning been told he had been outflanked by a 14-year-old boy and a man with a silver-edged sword from Detroit. The thing the look held beneath the assessment was a small, clean relief that the outflanking had in the event ended the war. Mr. Brooks, sir, is downstairs. He is, sir. He drove me up. I should very much like to meet him at last. He will come up, sir. I'll fetch him. Stay, he'll come up on his own. Ask Madame Pomfrey to come up as well, she will want to look at you for the record. Eric came up the spiral stair without making any sound. He had not been at the school before. He had been to many strange places in his life, and the school did not strike him as the strangest of them, but he kept his eye on the moving portraits along the staircase because the portraits had been watching him since he had come through the gates, and he did not, on principle, accept being watched by a thing he had not yet measured. In the headmaster's office, he stopped at the door. Mr. Brooks, headmaster. Please sit, he sat. He did not take off his coat. He did not shake Dumbledore's hand because he had not been offered the hand, and he would not have shaken it on the first meeting even if he had been. It was a habit. He sat in the chair beside Harry's chair, and he set both hands flat on his knees. You raised this boy, with Whistler and Quirrell, headmaster, the three of us, for 7 years. For 7 years. He has done a thing this week that no boy at this school has done in 23 generations of boys at this school. He did the job. He did the job. He did the job in a manner that suggests he was trained to do the job by a person who understood the job at a level the rest of us did not. I am not, Mr. Brooks, ungrateful for the training. I am in fact in your debt. I should like to be useful to you if there is a way. Headmaster, sir, the ledger you have, I think you have read. I have read it. There are 41 names in it that are of the wizarding world. Of those 41, 6 are dead in the graveyard at Little Hangleton. Of the remaining 35, the great majority will require a process I do not have access to. I cannot bring them down. The ministry can. The ministry on the basis of half those names will not. The Wisengamot on the basis of all of those names might. I will bring it to the Wisengamot. Then we are useful to one another, headmaster. We are. A long quiet. Then Dumbledore, after a moment, did something he had not done in many years in his office. He laughed. It was a small, dry laugh, the laugh of a man who had spent half a century being told he was the cleverest person in his country and had on this morning concluded he was not necessarily so, and the laugh did not hold any bitterness. It held instead the relief Harry had seen earlier in the look. The relief of having found someone after a long time who could be planned with. Will you have tea, Mr. Brooks? I'll have tea, headmaster. Harry, sir, pour the tea, please. Harry poured the tea. The tea ran into 3 cups on the desk between them, and the steam rose, and the morning sun through the round window at the back of the office caught the steam on its way up. And at the back of his head Harry felt, for the first time in 11 years, the absence of the small, steady pressure that had been there since the night his parents had died. The pressure was not there because the thing that had been making the pressure was not there. The thing was, on this morning, gone. He sat down again with his cup. He did not say anything. He listened to the 2 men begin the conversation that would, over the next 4 years, dismantle the cluster of wizarding houses that had been buying blood by the liter out of a basement in St. James's. He did not need to be in the conversation. He was, this morning, 14 years old, and his guardian was at his right elbow with a cup of school tea. And the work that was left was the kind of work the adults in the room had the experience to manage between them. Outside, on the lawn, Hermione and Ron walked along the lake with a third figure who had come up the drive with him. Quirrell, in a charity shop cloak and her own field boots, with the auto shotgun broken down in the case, and the case stowed in the boot of the Bronco at the gates. She was telling them about the cottage in Devon. She was telling them in particular about the kitchen and the wood stove. And Hermione, who had spent the last fortnight in a state of clenched preparation, was beginning by degrees to unclench. The thing the boy carried at the small of his back in its hawthorn sheath did not on this morning need to be drawn. The thing the man at his elbow carried at his shoulder in its silver-edged scabbard did not on this morning need to be drawn either. The morning on the lawns of the old school went on. Chapter 6 End.